Most killers let someone else find the body. They build an alibi, they call the police, they pretend to grieve. The ones in this video took it further. They sat in front of cameras, looked into the lens, and performed. They cried for missing children who were already dead. They begged for information about crimes they had committed. They gave interviews while the evidence dried on their hands. Some fooled entire communities. Some fooled the police. Some fooled the people who loved them most. Every single one of them got caught. This is 20 cases of killers who cried on camera. What they did, how they performed it, and exactly how the evidence dismantled them. Chris Watts, 2018, Colorado, USA. On the morning of August 14, 2018, Chris Watts walked out the front door of his house in Frederick, Colorado, stood on his porch, and looked into a news camera. He spoke quietly. He said he didn't know where his family was. He talked about his daughter's little couches in their bedroom, a Minnie Mouse one and a Sophia one, and how they would cuddle up on them to watch bubble guppies. He said not being able to tuck them in the night before was tearing him apart. Then he looked straight into the lens and said, "Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. Like if somebody has her, just please bring her back. I need to see everybody. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring them back." The reporter from Denver 7, Thomas Hoppo, had knocked on the door looking for a comment on a missing persons case. Watts invited him in and gave a 7-minute interview. The country watched it and felt sorry for him. Shanann was 34 years old and 15 weeks pregnant with a boy they had already named Nico. Their daughters Bella and Celeste were 4 and 3. Shanann's friend Nicole Atkinson had reported them missing the day before, on August 13th, after she came to the house, got no answer, kept calling, and couldn't reach anyone. That was the story Watts told. It was a lie from start to finish. He had killed all 3 of them that same morning, August 13th, in the hours before he went to work. Shanann had come home from a 5-day business trip in Arizona at around 2 a.m. They argued. He told her he wanted a separation. She told him he would never see the kids again. According to his own later confession, after she said that, he got on top of her and strangled her. He said he felt like something in his head had already made the decision before he even realised what he was doing. While he was carrying Shanann's body downstairs wrapped in a bedsheet, his daughters woke up. Bella walked in and saw him. He told her, "Mummy doesn't feel good." He then smothered both girls, one at a time, using a blanket from his truck. He loaded all 3 bodies into the truck and drove 45 minutes north to an oil field owned by his employer, Anadarko Petroleum. He buried Shanann in a shallow grave near a work site. He pushed his daughters' bodies through an 8-inch wide opening into 2 separate crude oil storage tanks. Then he drove back home, cleaned up, went to work, and the next morning stood on his porch and begged for their safe return. Detectives reviewing the footage immediately flagged something off. While Watts talked about his missing children, he smiled, not once, but repeatedly. A body language expert who later analysed the video described him as looking relieved, almost pleased, as though something heavy had been lifted off him. At one point he laughed slightly. He never once cried. His arms were folded tight across his chest the whole time, which analysts described as a way of keeping himself physically controlled and contained. When investigators brought him in for formal questioning that same day, he held the same line. He said there was no way he would harm anyone in his family. He said he was telling the absolute truth. He showed no visible emotion looking at photos of Shanann and the girls. Detectives gave him a polygraph. He failed it. That's when things started to break. Investigators brought his father, Ronnie Watts, into the room. In front of his dad, Chris Watts changed his story. He now claimed he had come downstairs that morning and watched Shanann strangling the girls through a baby monitor. He said he snapped and killed Shanann to stop her. It was a desperate lie layered on top of the original one. Investigators didn't believe it. Meanwhile, his girlfriend Nicole Kessinger, a co-worker at Anadarko who Watts had been sleeping with since June, had already called the police herself. She told them he had lied to her throughout their entire relationship, telling her he was almost divorced. She said that when Shanann was first reported missing, she had texted Watts and he seemed completely unbothered. She also told police she had no idea Shanann was pregnant until she read it in the news. Kessinger later said, If he was able to lie to me and hide something that big, what else was he lying about? On August 15th, 2 days after the murders, investigators found Shanann's body in the shallow grave at the oil field. Bella's body was recovered from one tank, Celeste's from another. Watts was arrested the same day. He confessed. In November 2018, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count for the unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a body. He took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He is currently held at a maximum security prison in Warpen, Wisconsin. In a prison interview conducted in February 2019 by investigators from the FBI, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and the Frederick Police Department, Watts gave more detail about what happened that morning. He said he felt like he had woken up that day already knowing what he was going to do. He said that when Bella woke up and saw him, she started crying, and when Bella cried, Celeste started crying too. He said, in that interview, that the last thing Bella said to him was, "Daddy, no." He told investigators he hears her say it every day. After his confession, detectives offered him lunch. He said yes, and asked for pizza. When the friends who had let Watts stay at their house the night after the murders found out he had been arrested, one of them told Denver 7, "We are so sorry we defended him. We feel stupid." The neighbour who found Shanann's car seat still in the garage that afternoon. The friend who kept calling Shanann's phone and getting no answer. The reporter who knocked on the door and got a 7-minute interview from the man who had done it. Nobody saw it. Everyone believed him. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next case on this list involves a man who did almost the exact same thing. Stood in front of cameras, cried, and begged. Except he kept up the act not for 1 day, but for over a week, while half the country searched for his missing children. Scott Peterson, 2002, California, USA. Lacey Peterson was 27 years old, 8 months pregnant, and by every account from friends and family, genuinely happy. She and her husband Scott had already picked a name for the boy she was carrying, Connor. They had a house in Modesto, California. They've been together since college. On the evening of December 23, 2002, she called her mum to talk about plans for Christmas Eve dinner the next day. She was never seen again. Scott Peterson told police he'd left home that morning to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina, about 90 miles away, in a small aluminium boat he'd bought just weeks earlier, one his own family didn't even know he had. He said when he got home around 5 p.m, the house was empty. The family dog was in the backyard, still wearing his leash. Lacey's keys, purse and wallet were inside. Her car was in the garage. From the moment police arrived, Scott Peterson was calm. Not quiet with grief calm, just calm. While Lacey's family, friends and hundreds of volunteers tore the city apart looking for her over the following weeks, detectives noted he never really fell apart. Lacey's cousin Harvey Kemple later told reporters, "I saw more reaction out of him when he burnt the goddarn chicken than when his wife went missing." Scott gave media interviews. He talked about how much he missed Lacey. He told CBS News, "She's the one that's not with our family. She's the one that we need to find and bring home." He described their marriage on ABC as glorious. He called her amazing, then corrected himself and said is amazing. That slip, past tense then present, was noticed. 6 days after Lacey disappeared, a 27-year-old massage therapist from Fresno named Amber Fry called the police. She told them she had been in a romantic relationship with Scott Peterson since November 20th, that he had told her he was single, and that on December 9th, 2 weeks before Lacey went missing, he had told her he had lost his wife, and that this Christmas would be his first without her. He said that to his girlfriend before his wife disappeared. Detectives immediately understood what that likely meant. He had been planning this for weeks. Police asked Fry to keep recording her phone calls with Scott, and she agreed. What followed was one of the most damning stretches of evidence in American true crime history. On New Year's Eve, 5 days after Lacey vanished, while hundreds of people gathered at a candlelight vigil in Modesto to pray for her safe return, Scott Peterson called Amber Fry and told her he was standing near the Eiffel Tower in Paris. He described the fireworks. He said the crowd was unreal. He gave fake names for his French companions. He was in Modesto. He made that call 10 minutes before the vigil started. On January 24, 2003, Amber Frey held a press conference with her attorney Gloria Allred. She publicly confirmed the affair, standing in front of cameras with tears in her eyes. "Scott told me he was not married," she said. "We did have a romantic relationship. I am very sorry for Lacey's family and the pain that this has caused them." Lacey's family, who had publicly supported Scott up to that point, immediately withdrew. Her brother Brent said Scott had admitted the affair to him in a phone call 9 days earlier. The same week, Scott gave his most high-profile interview, a sit-down with Diane Sawyer on Good Morning America. He denied killing his wife. He said he'd had nothing to do with her disappearance. He also made the claim that Lacey had already known about the affair and was okay with it. He said their marriage was glorious again. He did not cry. During that same interview, he was caught in a direct lie. He told Sawyer he'd informed police about Amber on the day Lacey went missing. He had not. He later called ABC to walk that back. In the meantime, he tried to list their house for sale. He asked if it could be sold furnished. By March, police had reclassified the case as a homicide investigation. Then, in April 2003, an off-leash dog sniffed out something on the shore of San Francisco Bay at Point Isabel Regional Shoreline in Richmond, California, roughly 4 miles from where Scott said he'd been fishing on Christmas Eve. On April 13th, the badly decomposed body of a male fetus washed up. The following day, a female torso was found about a mile away. DNA confirmed both were Lacey and Connor Peterson. Police used GPS tracking and phone taps to locate Scott. They found him 4 days later near San Diego, a 7-hour drive from Modesto. He had dyed his hair and beard blonde, grown a goatee, and was driving a car that wasn't his. In the vehicle, nearly $15,000 in cash, 4 cell phones, his brother's driver's license, 12 Viagra tablets, camping equipment, and what investigators called survival gear. Prosecutors believed he was heading for Mexico. He was arrested on April 18, 2003, and driven 10 hours back to Modesto. At trial, a hair matching Lacey's DNA was found on a pair of pliers inside his boat. Prosecutors argued he had used homemade cement anchors to weigh her body down in the bay. The bodies washed up within miles of where he said he'd fished. Amber Frey's testimony and 29 hours of recorded phone calls shredded what was left of his credibility. On November 12, 2004, the jury convicted him of first-degree murder for Lacey's death and second-degree murder for Connor's. He was sentenced to death in March 2005. In 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned his death sentence, ruling that the trial judge had made errors during jury selection. In December 2021, he was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He continues to maintain his innocence. The Los Angeles Innocence Project took up his case in 2024, and a judge has since granted access to previously withheld evidence for additional DNA testing. As of this writing, his murder convictions stand. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next case involves a mother who had the entire country convinced her children had been taken at gunpoint, while she already knew exactly where they were. Susan Smith, 1994, South Carolina, USA. On the night of October 25, 1994, a woman named Susan Smith knocked on the door of a house in Union, South Carolina, in a panic. She told the family inside that a black man had jumped into her car at a red light, pointed a gun at her, ordered her out, and driven off, with her 2 little boys still strapped in their car seats in the back. Michael was 3 years old. Alex was 14 months. She was 23. She was crying. She was terrified, or appeared to be. The family called police immediately. What followed was 9 days of national media coverage, candlelight vigils, a coast-to-coast manhunt for a suspect who did not exist, and one of the most sustained on-camera performances of grief ever broadcast on American television. Susan and her estranged husband David stood side by side at press conferences. David had no idea what had actually happened, and his pain was genuine. Susan's was not. At one press conference, she looked directly into the cameras and said, I would like to say to whoever has my children, please bring them home to us where they belong. On NBC's Today Show, the morning of November 3rd, the 9th day, she told the country, "As a mother, it's only a natural instinct to protect your children from any harm, and the hardest part of this whole ordeal is not knowing if your children are getting what they need to survive, and it hurts." Hours after that interview aired, she confessed. The boys were never missing. On the night of October 25th, Susan had driven to a boat ramp at John D. Long Lake, a quiet body of water just outside of town. She put her 1990 red Mazda Protégé into neutral, got out, and let it roll down the ramp into the water. Michael and Alex were in their car seats. Her wedding album was in the trunk. State reconstruction would later determine it took 6 minutes for the car to fill with water and sink. Susan was on the bank while it happened. In her own handwritten confession, she wrote, "I dropped to the lowest when I allowed my children to go down that ramp into the water without me." The car came to rest 122 feet from the shore, in 18 feet of water. Initial police searches had only gone out to 30 feet and missed it entirely. Police were sceptical of her story almost from the start, though they kept that from David and the public. The first crack in her account appeared almost immediately. She told investigators the carjacking happened at a red light at an otherwise empty intersection. The South Carolina Department of Transportation confirmed that the traffic signal at that location was programmed to stay green on her route unless a vehicle triggered it from the cross street. With no other cars present, as she claimed, the light could not have been red. It was a small detail, but it unravelled everything. She was given a polygraph test on the second day of the investigation. She failed it. She kept failing them. David passed his without any issue. While investigators quietly built their case behind the scenes, Susan kept going in front of cameras. She went to New York. She did more interviews. The former head of the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, Robert Stewart, later said, "We felt very strongly her interviews on TV were not sincere. She was faking some of her reactions." Prosecutor Tommy Pope, who tried the case, noted that the media pressure actually helped break her. The more she told the story, the harder it became to keep it straight. What police also knew, and the public did not, was that 1 week before the drownings, Susan had received a letter from a man named Tom Findley. He was 27, the son of the owner of Conso Products, the largest employer in Union. Susan had been seeing him. The letter, dated October 17, 1994, was typed and formal in tone. In it, Findley ended the relationship. His reason, stated plainly, "There are some things about you that aren't suited for me, and yes, I am speaking about your children. I'm sure that your kids are good kids, but it really wouldn't matter how good they may be. The fact is, I just don't want children." The letter was later recovered from the submerged car and read aloud at trial. Findley saw Susan 3 times on October 25th, the day of the drownings. She was emotional and not holding herself together well. That night, she drove to John D. Long Lake. In her handwritten confession, which she gave to Union County Sheriff Howard Wells on November 3rd, she wrote, "I was in love with someone very much, but he didn't love me and never would." She did not plan to survive. Her defense would later argue she had intended to kill herself along with the boys, but got out of the car before it rolled. Prosecutors did not accept that framing. Either way, she watched her children drown and then knocked on a stranger's door and blamed a black man she invented. The racial dimension of what she did was not lost on anyone. She described the carjacker as a black man wearing a knit hat. Law enforcement across the country had spent 9 days looking for him. Civil rights attorney Gloria Brown Marshall, a law professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, later pointed out the centuries-old pattern Smith had tapped into, the false accusation of a black man by a white woman, and noted that any number of innocent men could have been arrested based solely on her word. After her confession, police divers found the Mazda the same day. Michael and Alex were still inside, still in their car seats. They were buried together in a single casket. At trial in July 1995, the jury convicted Susan Smith of 2 counts of murder in 2.5 hours. The prosecution had sought the death penalty. The jury declined. She was sentenced to 2 concurrent life terms with the possibility of parole after 30 years. On November 20th, 2024, She appeared before the parole board via video link from the Leith Correctional Institution in Greenwood, South Carolina. David Smith was there in person to oppose her release. The board denied her parole unanimously. She will be eligible to apply again in 2 years. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next case involves a man in the UK who didn't just cry on camera for a few days. He embedded himself so deeply into the search for 2 missing girls that he was speaking at vigils, giving interviews, and comforting the victims' own families while the bodies were hidden in his home. Ian Huntley, 2002, Soham, England. On the evening of August 4th, 2002, 2 best friends left a family barbecue in the small English town of Soham, Cambridgeshire. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were both 10 years old. They were wearing matching red Manchester United football shirts. They told no one at the barbecue where they were going. They walked down the street, past a house at 5 College Close, and were never seen alive again. The man at that house was Ian Huntley, 28 years old, the caretaker at the nearby Soham Village College. He knew both girls. His girlfriend, Maxine Carr, was their teaching assistant at the local primary school, the school they attended. Huntley saw the girls walking past and called out to them. He told them Maxine was inside. She was not. Carr was in Grimsby visiting her mother. The girls went in anyway because they trusted Carr and knew Huntley through her. Within a short time of entering that house, both of them were dead. Huntley loaded their bodies into his car that night and drove roughly 20 miles to a ditch near the perimeter fence of RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk. He dumped them there, cut off their clothing, and set fire to them to destroy forensic evidence. Then he drove back to Soham and waited. When Holly's mother looked for the girls around 8 p.m. and couldn't find them, the alarm went out. Police were called at 9:55 p.m. By midnight, a formal search had begun. Over the next 2 weeks, it became one of the largest and most intensely covered missing children cases in British history. Ian Huntley was immediately established as the last person to have seen the girls alive. He told police he had spoken to them briefly on his doorstep while washing his dog, that they'd asked about Maxine and whether she'd got the teaching job she applied for, and that they had then walked off in the direction of the local library. He gave his account calmly and in detail. Then he started doing TV interviews. He spoke to the press multiple times during the first week of the search. He inserted himself into the community's grief, giving statements about how the town was feeling, how desperate everyone was, how much everyone wanted the girls home safely. By the second week, he had become what Wikipedia's article on the case describes as an unofficial spokesman for the community. He told a Sky News correspondent named Jeremy Thompson that he was holding on to a glimmer of hope the girls would be found safe and well. He described exactly where he had last seen them walking. Behind the camera, he was losing the performance. He began visibly dropping weight. He showed signs of insomnia. At one point, according to documented reports of the investigation, he confronted an officer and said, "You think I've done it? I was the last person to see them," before breaking down in tears. A doctor prescribed him antidepressants on August 13th due to his erratic state. He had become, by all appearances, a man crumbling under the weight of not knowing what had happened to 2 children he cared about. That was the picture. A Press Association reporter named Brian Farmer noticed something was off during one of his interviews with Huntley. He asked Huntley whether the girls were the type who might wander off with a stranger. Huntley said Holly might go along with it, but that Jessica would put up a fight. Farmer later told ITV News, "I do remember thinking, that's very strange. How could he possibly know? He's the caretaker of a school they don't go to." Farmer reported his suspicions to police. At one press conference where Holly's father Kevin spoke to the media, Huntley stood nearby and offered his condolences directly to him, saying, "Kevin, I'm so sorry. I didn't realise it was your daughter." He was standing 20 feet away from the father of a girl he had murdered and killed 4 days earlier. The physical evidence started closing in. A woman named Debbie Davis, then deputy editor of a local newspaper, had knocked on Huntley and Carr's door during the first days of the search to give them a missing persons poster. Carr had taken the poster and put it up in their front window. The Manchester United shirts the girls had been wearing when they disappeared were already bagged in a bin outside the house at the time. Investigators found those shirt remains later charred but identifiable, in a storage building at Soham Village College where Huntley worked. Police arrested both Huntley and Maxine Carr at 4:30 a.m. on August 17th. Carr immediately confessed that she had provided Huntley with a false alibi. She had told police she was home with Huntley the night the girls disappeared, when in fact she had been out in Grimsby. She insisted, however, that she had not known about the murders when she lied for him. Later that same day, a gamekeeper named Keith Pryor discovered the bodies of both girls in a ditch about 10 miles from Soham, near RAF Lakenheath. They were lying side by side. They had been there for 13 days. Both corpses were in an advanced state of decomposition. By August 20th, police had enough physical evidence from Huntley's home, his car, and Soham Village College to formally charge him with 2 counts of murder. He was initially detained at Rampton Secure Hospital for a mental health evaluation before being declared fit for trial. At trial in late 2003 at the Old Bailey, Huntley claimed the girls came into his house because Holly had a nosebleed. He said he accidentally knocked her into the bath and she drowned, and then smothered Jessica to stop her screaming. The pathologist called that version of events wholly implausible. The jury took 5 days to reject Huntley's account and convict him on both counts on December 17, 2003. His judge, Mr. Justice Moses, told him, "They were happy, intelligent and loyal. They were much loved by their families and all who knew them. You murdered them both. You are the one person who knows how you murdered them. You are the one person who knows why." Huntley was sentenced to 2 life terms. A minimum tariff of 40 years was later set by the High Court, meaning he will not be eligible for parole until 2042, when he would be 68. After the conviction, a public inquiry led by Sir Michael Bishard revealed that Humberside Police had recorded 11 contacts involving Huntley between 1995 and 1999, including 9 allegations of sexual offences, 4 allegations of rape, and 4 counts of unlawful sexual intercourse with underage girls. None of it had been passed to the school that hired him. The inquiry found systematic failures in record keeping and information sharing between police forces that had allowed a known predator to walk straight into a job with access to children. It led to a complete overhaul of vetting procedures across the UK and the creation of a national police database, launched in 2011, combining intelligence from 43 forces and 150 computer systems. That database exists today because Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman walked past a house in Soham in their red football shirts and knocked on a door. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next case involves a woman who appeared on television, looking straight into the camera and saying she would never, never, ever hurt her stepson, while the boy's blood was already soaking through the carpet of her bedroom floor. Diane Downs, 1983, Oregon, USA. Diane Downs, 1983, Oregon, USA. Just after 10 p.m. on May 19, 1983, a woman walked through the emergency room doors at Mackenzie Willamette Hospital in Springfield, Oregon. She was calm, eerily, unnervingly calm. In the back seat of her car were her 3 children, Christy, aged 8, Cheryl, aged 7, and Danny, aged 3. All of them soaked in blood, all of them shot at close range. Cheryl was already dead. Christy had suffered a massive stroke and was barely breathing. Danny was paralysed from the waist down. The woman, their mother Diane Downs, stood nearby and watched. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She told her story. A bushy-haired stranger had flagged her down on Old Mohawk Road outside Springfield. He wanted the car. She refused. He reached through the window and shot her children one by one. She faked throwing her keys into the bushes, jumped back in, and drove to the hospital. To prove she'd been there too, she showed them a gunshot wound to her left forearm. Detective Doug Welch noticed red flags immediately. She was right-handed, yet the bullet hit her left arm, a placement that made far more sense if she'd shot herself. She claimed she'd been driving a dark, rural road at night with 3 sleeping children for no clear reason. Witnesses saw her car moving at 5 to 7 miles per hour on the way to the hospital, not at high speed, and there was no blood splatter on the driver's side interior. Impossible if a gunman had leaned through that window and fired repeatedly. Within weeks of the shooting, while her surviving children were still in hospital beds, Diane Downs began giving television interviews. She smiled, she laughed. She reenacted the shooting with theatrical energy that stunned everyone who watched. She described outsmarting the bushy-haired stranger as if recounting an adventure. True crime journalist Anne Rule, who covered the case and later wrote the definitive book Small Sacrifices, had spent her career around killers and victims. She said what she saw from Diane Downs was not grief. In one interview, Diane looked directly at the camera and said, "Why would I have taken my kids to the hospital? Wouldn't I have made sure they were dead and then cried crocodile tears?" She thought she was making a logical defense. She was telling people exactly how a guilty person thinks. Police dug into her life and found everything they needed. Diane had been obsessively in love with a married co-worker named Robert Knickerbocker, whom she'd met while working as a postal carrier in Arizona. Knickerbocker had been clear about one thing. He had no interest in raising someone else's children. He told police she had been stalking him, writing daily letters he returned unopened, and that he had reconciled with his wife and was relieved she was gone. Investigators found Diane's private diaries, which laid out the obsession in her own handwriting. Their conclusion? In Diane's mind, her children were the obstacle between her and the man she wanted. As long as he refused to be anyone's father, those children had to go. She had bought a .22 caliber handgun in Arizona and denied owning any gun when police asked. Both her ex-husband and Knickerbocker confirmed she absolutely had one. Investigators found unfired cartridges at her home with extractor markings matching the murder weapon. The gun was never recovered, but the cartridges were enough. On February 28, 1984, 9 months after the shooting, Diane Downs was arrested. When her trial began in May 1984, she was visibly, heavily pregnant. She told reporters the new baby was her way of coping with losing her children. The children she had put bullets into. The prosecution's most powerful witness was the one Diane had never expected to speak. Christy Downs had spent months in recovery, slowly regaining the ability to communicate after the stroke her mother's bullet had caused. She was 9 years old when she took the witness stand. Prosecutor Fred Hughey asked if she remembered who had shot her. Christy said, "My mum." She described her mother stopping the car, walking to the trunk, retrieving something, returning to the window, and shooting her and her siblings. There was no bushy-haired stranger. There was no carjacking. There was only their mother. The surgeon who had saved Christy's life also testified. He described how Christy's vital signs spiked in terror every time Diane walked into her recovery room. He also described Diane pulling him aside and telling him Christy was brain dead and that he should pull the plug. Christy was not brain dead. She was recovering. The surgeon refused, obtained legal guardianship of Christy through a judge, and from that point forward, Diane's instructions about her daughter's care were ignored entirely. In June 1984, Diane Downs was convicted of 1 count of aggravated murder and 2 counts of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years. She showed no breakdown, no tears. 3 years into her sentence, she scaled an 18-foot razor wire fence and escaped. She was caught 11 days later, hiding in a house blocks from the facility. She claimed she had escaped to find the bushy-haired stranger herself and wanted revenge. Nobody believed her. Christy and Danny were eventually adopted by lead prosecutor Fred Hughey and his wife. Christy grew up, married, and had children of her own. She named her daughter Cheryl after the sister Diane had killed. Diane Downs has appeared before the Oregon Parole Board multiple times, maintaining her innocence at every hearing. At her 2025 appearance, she told the board she was guilty of putting her children in danger, but not of shooting them. The board denied parole and pushed her next hearing to 2031. She is now 69 years old, still insisting a bushy-haired stranger did it, a man no one ever found, no one ever identified, and no evidence ever placed on that road. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next case involves a man who did his crying, not in front of journalists, but in front of a jury, where photographs of his murdered wife's body were projected on a screen, and he chose that moment, years after killing her, to finally perform his grief. Mick and Marie Philpot, 2012, Derby, England. At around 4 a.m. on May 11, 2012, a house fire tore through 18 Victory Road in Allenton, Derby, England. The street was quiet. Most of the neighbourhood was asleep. By the time the fire brigade arrived, the semi-detached council house was engulfed. Inside, on the upper floor, were 6 children. Jade, aged 10, Duane, aged 13, John, aged 9, Jack, aged 8, Jesse, aged 6, Jaden, aged 5. 5 of them were dead before morning. Duane was pulled out alive, but with catastrophic brain damage from smoke inhalation. He died 2 days later at Birmingham Children's Hospital. All 6 children had died from smoke inhalation. They had been asleep in their beds when the fire started. Their father, Mick Philpot, was reported to have made what witnesses described as valiant attempts to save them, climbing a ladder, screaming their names, trying to get to the windows. By the time cameras arrived, he was the devastated father who had tried everything and lost everything. And 5 days later, on May 16, 2012, he stood in front of a room full of reporters at a press conference alongside his wife Mairead and performed the role of his life. Mick wept. He dabbed his eyes. He spoke about the community coming together, about the outpouring of support from neighbours, about how overwhelmed he and Mairead were by the love they had received. He announced that Duane's organs would be donated to help another child in need. He said that decision made him happy and took a bit of the pain away. The cameras rolled. Journalists wrote about the broken father who had lost everything. The public donated money. A fund was set up by local residents to cover the cost of the 6 children's funerals. It raised over £11,000. The nation's heart went out to them. What nobody in that press conference room knew was that police had already started bugging the Philpots' hotel room at the Premier Inn in Derby the day before. On May 15th, the same day, police confirmed the fire had been started deliberately with petrol poured through the letterbox. What police heard in those recordings told them everything. To understand what Mick Philpot was doing at that press conference, you need to understand who he was before the fire. Mick had fathered 17 children across multiple women by the time the flames took 6 of them. He had been living in his Derby council house in an arrangement that had made the tabloids years earlier. His wife Mairead and his live-in mistress Lisa Willis, both under the same roof, along with their combined children. In 2006, he had gone to the newspapers demanding a bigger council house to fit them all in. He appeared on the Jeremy Kyle show. He was not a private man. But Mick's world had fractured in early 2012 when Lisa Willis left him. She packed up her 5 children, 4 of them fathered by Philpot, and moved out. Mick couldn't stand it. He wanted those children back. He was furious that Willis had taken them and was raising them without him. A custody hearing was scheduled for the morning of May 11, 2012, the same morning the fire started. The plan, as investigators pieced it together, was straightforward in its horror. Mick, Mairead and their friend Paul Mosley would pour petrol through the letterbox of their own house, set it on fire, and then Mick would dramatically rescue the children from the smoke. He would be the hero. Lisa Willis would be framed as the one who had set the fire in revenge. The custody hearing would swing his way. He would get the children back and be celebrated for saving them. The plan went wrong in every direction. Mick didn't get to the children in time. The smoke moved faster than any of them had anticipated. 6 kids who should have been rescued for the cameras never made it out. Petrol was found inside the letterbox of the property on May 14th, confirming arson. A discarded petrol container and a glove were found near the house. When forensic investigators examined the clothing of Mick, Mairead and Mosley, they found petrol on all 3 of them. Meanwhile, in the hotel where the Philpots were staying while their house was a crime scene, police were listening. The recordings captured Mick reassuring Mairead. "Have they got any evidence on you?" "They've got nothing on me. Nothing." The recordings also captured the 2 of them going over their alibis together, rehearsing the story of how many times Mick had climbed the ladder during his so-called rescue attempt. They weren't grieving, they were coordinating. Mick and Mairead were arrested on May 29, 2012, and charged with murder the following day. Paul Mosley was arrested and charged in November 2012. All 3 charges were later downgraded to manslaughter, as the court accepted that none of them had intended to kill the children, only to use them as props in a plan to destroy Lisa Willis. The trial began at Nottingham Crown Court on February 12, 2013. The prosecution described Mick as the driving force behind the entire plot. a man who had wanted to be a hero and a victim simultaneously. The judge presiding over the case called him a disturbingly dangerous man with no moral compass. Psychologist Glenn Wilson, who assessed Mick during proceedings, diagnosed him as a clinical psychopath and exhibitionist with antisocial personality disorder. This was not, as it turned out, surprising to anyone who had known Mick Philpot over the years. Back in 1978, at the age of 21, he had attempted to murder his then-girlfriend Kim Hill by stabbing her more than a dozen times in her bed because she had written him a letter saying she was leaving. He had previously shot her in the groin with a crossbow for wearing a dress he considered too short. He served time for the stabbing. He got out. He had children. He had more children. And eventually, when the thing he wanted most, control over a custody battle, slipped out of his reach, he made a decision that killed 6 of them. On April 2nd, 2013, all 3 were found guilty of manslaughter. Mick received a life sentence with a minimum of 15 years. Mairead and Mosley each received 17 years. The trial judge told Mairead directly that while she believed her grief was real, Mairead had put her husband before her own children. Those were her children. Her first responsibility had been to them. Instead, she had joined the plan. The 6 children's joint funeral was held on June 22, 2012, at St Mary's Church in Derby. Mick and Mairead were not permitted to attend. They were already in custody. Their coffins were carried into the church without their parents present. Mairead was released from prison in 2020, having served just 8.5 years. Mosley was released in 2023. He died in 2025. Mick remains at HMP Wakefield and will not be eligible for parole until 2028. At the press conference in May 2012, Mick Philpot had stood in front of cameras with tears on his face and candles burning for his children around him, asking the public for help finding out what had happened to them. He already knew exactly what had happened. He had planned it, prepared it, and stood outside watching it unfold. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Some killers cry because they think it will make them look innocent. In the next case, the man on camera had thought through every detail so carefully that investigators initially had almost nothing to go on, until a piece of evidence so small and so specific unravelled the entire lie in one moment. Gerard Baden-Clay, 2012, Queensland, Australia. At 7:15 on the morning of Friday, April 20th, 2012, Gerard Baden-Clay called emergency services in Brisbane, Australia. His wife Alison, he said, had not come home from her early morning walk. He was calm on the call. When the first officer arrived at the family home in Brookfield, in Brisbane's western suburbs, Gerard was neatly dressed and was getting the couple's 3 daughters ready for school. He was composed, helpful, cooperative. He gave the officer his version of events, clearly and without hesitation. The officer called his superior almost immediately. The reason was the scratches on Gerard's face. 2 fresh abrasions on his right cheek, visible to anyone who looked. Gerard had an explanation ready. Shaving cuts. He said he had been rushing that morning, was under pressure getting the children organised, and had caught himself with a razor. The officer wasn't buying it, and neither was anyone else. Within hours, the area around Brookfield was mobilised. One of the largest missing persons searches in Brisbane's history was launched. Emergency services combed surrounding bushland, dams, and abandoned mine shafts. Volunteers joined the search. A mannequin was dressed in clothing similar to what Alison had last been wearing and displayed publicly to help jog witnesses' memories. Cards and flowers began to pile up on the front fence of the Baden-Clay home. The community poured its support into the family, and Gerard gave television interviews. He appeared in front of cameras looking distressed, his voice wavering, appealing for anyone with information about his wife to come forward. He told Channel 9, "I'm trying to look after my children at the moment. We've got 3 young girls. We really trust that the police are doing everything they can to find my wife. I've tried to help the police as much as I can." He was the worried husband, the dedicated father, keeping it together for his daughters. People watching from across Australia felt for him. What they didn't know was that on the evening of April 19th, the night before he reported Alison missing, Gerard had called his mistress, a woman named Toni McHugh, and told her that Alison would be attending the same real estate training seminar as her the following day. Toni had pushed him. She wanted to know when he was actually going to leave his marriage. Gerard told her he loved her. He told her he was going to marry her one day. His phone records showed it had been placed on a charger beside his bed at 1:48 a.m. on April 20th, several hours before he claimed he woke to find Alison gone. After Alison's body was found, Gerard called Tony and told her to lay low. Alison Baden-Clay had been 43 years old, a former beauty queen and a successful executive at Flight Centre in Brisbane. She and Gerard had met as colleagues at that same company years earlier. By the time she disappeared, their marriage had been fracturing for years. In October 2011, Alison had discovered that Gerard had been having an affair with Toni McHugh, a woman who worked at his real estate business since August 2008. The affair had been running for 3 years before Alison found out. Toni had left her 17-year marriage for Gerard. Gerard had promised her repeatedly that he was going to leave Alison. He never did. After the affair was discovered, a marriage counsellor began seeing the couple. The counsellor had specifically asked them to set aside time each day for Alison to air her grievances about the infidelity. By April 2012, those sessions had been underway for months, and Alison had been pressing Gerard hard. He had also been financially drowning. His Century 21 real estate franchise, which had been doing well before the catastrophic Brisbane floods damaged the property market, had collapsed into more than $500,000 in business debt. A forensic accountant who testified at trial found that Gerard owed roughly $300,000 to family and friends on top of that, against assets of approximately $70,000. He was broke, cornered, and facing a situation the following morning where his wife and his mistress would be in the same room at a professional seminar. 10 days after Alison was reported missing, a kayaker found a woman's body on the bank beneath Colo Creek Bridge at Anstead, approximately 13 kilometres from the Baden-Clay home. The following day, it was confirmed to be Alison. She was still wearing her clothes. The autopsy could not determine a precise cause of death. The body had been exposed to the elements for 10 days. But investigators found several things that told a story. Leaves found in Alison's hair and on her clothing matched plant species from her own backyard and the church next door, not from the creek bank where she was found. She had been moved there after she died. A bloodstain was found in the boot of her car, and 4 forensic experts examined the scratches on Gerard's cheeks. All 4 testified that the abrasions were consistent with fingernail scratches, not with a razor blade. The pattern, the depth, and the shape of the marks did not match what a shaving cut produces. What they did match was the kind of marks left when someone's face is scratched during a struggle. Alison had fought back. In the final moments of her life, she had reached up and raked her fingers across her husband's face, hard enough to leave marks that were still visible the next morning when police knocked on his door. Gerard was formally charged with murder and interfering with a corpse on June 13, 2012. He pleaded not guilty. His defence at trial was that he had gone to bed at around 10 p.m. on April 19th, leaving Alison watching television, and had woken to find her gone. He had nothing to do with her death. He was not there when it happened. That claim would cost him everything. The trial began at the Brisbane Supreme Court on June 10, 2014. The prosecution built its case entirely on circumstantial evidence. There was no weapon, no witnesses, no definitive cause of death determined by autopsy. What there was: the affair, the debt, the timing, the scratches, the plant material, the blood stain in the car, the phone records, the call to his mistress telling her to go quiet, and the life insurance policy on Alison worth $800,000, which Gerard had begun making inquiries about the day after her body was found. On July 15, 2014, after 5 weeks of trial, the jury convicted Gerard Baden-Clay of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 15 years. He appealed. In December 2015, the Queensland Court of Appeal downgraded the conviction to manslaughter, ruling that the evidence could not exclude the possibility that Alison died accidentally during a physical confrontation. The decision caused public outrage. The Queensland Director of Public Prosecutions took it straight to the High Court of Australia. In July 2016, 5 High Court judges heard the appeal. On August 31, 2016, they unanimously reinstated the murder conviction. Their reasoning was direct. Gerard had testified that he was not present when Alison died and could not have been the cause of her death, intentionally or otherwise. Having run that defence at trial, he could not later benefit from a theory of accidental death that his own evidence had ruled out. The $800,000 life insurance payout was frozen throughout the legal process. In 2017, it was transferred to Alison's 3 daughters. Gerard was ruled not entitled to any benefit arising from his wife's death. He remains in prison. The scratches on his face, the ones he said were shaving cuts, were the first thing that told investigators they were looking at a killer. Alison had made sure of that. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Not every killer is caught by something as visible as a mark on their face. In the next case, the person standing in front of cameras had left almost no physical evidence at all, and used that absence to stay one step ahead of police for longer than anyone should have been able to manage. Stuart Hazell, 2012, London, England. Tia Sharp was 12 years old. She called Stuart Hazell Grandad. He wasn't her biological grandfather. He was the long-term partner of her grandmother, Christine Bicknell, a woman he had met in 2002 when Tia was just 2 years old. Over the following decade, Hazell had become a fixture in Tia's life. She trusted him completely. When she wanted to spend the weekend of August 2nd, 2012, at her grandmother's house in New Addington, South London, she texted Hazell directly to ask if she could come, even though Christine wouldn't be home until the following day. Tia was that comfortable with him. She had no reason not to be. CCTV footage showed the two of them travelling together from South Croydon Station to New Addington on the afternoon of August 2nd, stopping at a fish and chip shop on the way. It also caught them briefly in a local co-op store. Those images were the last confirmed sightings of Tia Sharp alive. Hazell killed her in the early hours of August 3rd, 2012. He sexually assaulted her and most likely smothered her, though the precise cause of death could never be formally confirmed. The reason it couldn't be confirmed would come out later, and it was directly connected to what Hazell did next. He dressed her body in pink and white pyjama bottoms and a vest. He took photographs of her. He then wrapped her in a black bedsheet, placed her inside black bin bags, carried her up to the loft of the house, and left her there. He texted Christine Bicknell a warm, loving message that morning, as if nothing had happened. When Christine came home, he told her Tia had left around midday to go to Croydon to buy sandals from Primark. The following day, August 4th, Tia's family reported her missing. What happened over the next week was one of the most disturbing public spectacles in recent British criminal history. 80 police officers were assigned to the search. 800 hours of CCTV footage were collected and reviewed. 55 reported sightings of Tia came in from the public, none of them verified. A mannequin was dressed in similar clothing to help identify her. Her uncle David Sharp made a televised appeal on August 7th. The search was national news, and Stuart Hazell was right there in the middle of it. He joined the searches for Tia. He spoke to neighbours. He participated in the public effort to find the girl whose body was lying above his head in the loft. On August 9th, the day before her body was found, he gave a television interview to journalist Mark Williams-Thomas for ITV News. He looked into the camera and said he knew deep down in his heart that Tia had walked out of the house. He said she was like his own daughter. He said he loved her to bits and was praying for her safe return. Then he added, with his voice carrying exactly the right amount of pain, "I know she was seen walking down the pathway. She made her way down that track. What happened after that, I don't know." While he gave that interview, Tia's body was in the loft directly above him. Police had already searched the house multiple times by that point. Officers visited on August 4th and 5th and made brief checks of the loft both times, but they were conducting a missing persons search. They were looking for a live child, not a body. On August 8th, a search dog gave an indication of a dead body in the house. No action was taken. Hazell insisted Tia had left the house alive. Officers accepted his account and moved on. The fourth search, on August 10th, was different. 2 police family liaison officers noticed a smell inside the property, an intense, unmistakable smell that had been building for over a week in the summer heat. The hot weather had accelerated decomposition significantly. This time, police went into the loft properly. They found Tia, wrapped in the black bedsheet inside the bin bags, hidden in the dark. The decomposition was so advanced that dental records were needed to confirm it was her. It was also so advanced that the post-mortem examination concluded without being able to establish a definitive cause of death. Exactly the outcome Hazell had created by hiding her up there for 8 days in August. Hazell woke early that morning and left the house before police arrived. He was arrested at 8:25 p.m. that same evening at Cannon Hill Common in Morden after a member of the public called in a tip. When police interviewed him, he asked for a couple of minutes with his solicitor before saying anything about the murder of Tia Sharp. He never did answer that question directly. What police found at the house answered it for him. 2 memory cards were recovered from the property, one of them hidden in a door frame on the ground floor. The images and videos on those cards included footage of Tia sleeping in her bedroom, videos of her applying moisturiser to her legs, and photographs taken after she was dead. Forensic examination also found Tia's blood on Hazell's belt. Police also established that in the weeks before the murder, Hazell had been filming Tia sleeping on 3 separate nights in July. He had removed the bathroom door from its frame, telling the family he was painting it so he could watch her. He had also modified a light fitting in her bedroom to create a viewing gap. Investigators found that Hazell had been searching online for indecent images of children who wore glasses, like Tia did. On the night of her death, his phone showed he had also been searching for incest pornography. His trial began at the Old Bailey on May 7, 2013. He pleaded not guilty. 5 days in, with the jury having already been shown the evidence from the memory cards, including images described by court reporters as the most explicit ever presented during a British criminal trial, Hazell changed his plea to guilty. He was sentenced on May 14, 2013. Life imprisonment with a minimum term of 38 years. The judge described him as a violent and dangerous man who posed a significant risk to young girls. Tia's mother, Natalie, had written in her victim statement that she had placed her ultimate trust in Hazell. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner publicly apologised for the failure to find Tia's body sooner. A sergeant and a constable involved in the earlier searches received formal disciplinary action. Tia's grandmother, Christine Bicknell, was arrested and later released. No charges were brought against her. The house at New Addington was demolished by Croydon Council in June 2013. Stuart Hazell will not be eligible for parole consideration until he is in his 70s at the earliest. He sat in front of a camera and said Tia was like his own daughter. At that moment, she was above him in a bin bag. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Some killers use tears and public grief to buy themselves time. Others use something more calculated, a carefully constructed identity as a concerned parent, a grieving partner, a pillar of the community. In the next case, the person in front of the cameras had spent years building exactly that image, and the people around them had no reason to look any closer until it was far too late. Iftikhar and Farzana Ahmed, 2003, Warrington, England. Shafilia Ahmed was good at school. She was consistently achieving top grades at Great Sankey High School in Warrington, England. She wanted to study law. She had close friends, a sense of humour, and a clear idea of who she wanted to be. She was also living in a level of fear most people will never fully comprehend. She wrote about it in her poetry. All they think about is honour. I was like a normal teenage kid. Didn't ask too much. I just wanted to fit in. She was born in Bradford on July 14, 1986, the eldest child of Iftikhar and Farzana Ahmed, both originally from Pakistan. The family had settled in Warrington, Cheshire, where Shafilia grew up attending British schools, making British friends, and developing the kind of ordinary teenage life her parents had already decided they would not allow. They wanted her to dress modestly, avoid boys, follow their cultural rules, and eventually marry a man they chose. Shafilia wanted to wear normal clothes and become a lawyer. That conflict would cost her her life. The abuse started years before the end. Teachers saw bruises on her. Friends heard her talk about how frightened she was at home. In 2002, her father burned all her school books to stop her studying. In February 2003, she ran away and approached social services, saying she had experienced domestic violence since she was 15, that both parents had attacked her, one holding her while the other hit, and that she was terrified of being forced into a marriage abroad. Social services placed her in emergency accommodation, her parents found her. They drugged her and took her to Pakistan. There, the family attempted to arrange a marriage against her will. She refused. Faced with what was being done to her, she swallowed bleach. The damage to her esophagus was catastrophic. She spent weeks in a Pakistani hospital while her parents returned to England. When she was well enough to travel, she was brought back to the UK, spending her 17th birthday recovering in hospital. Her parents told doctors the bleach incident had been an accident, that she had drunk it during a power outage, mistaking it for mouthwash. The prosecutor at their eventual trial would call this claim a stupid and obvious lie. In September 2003, Shafilya enrolled at a local college, still physically weakened from the bleach damage. She was trying to continue her education. 1 week later, she was dead. On the evening of September 11, 2003, Shafilya was picked up from her part-time job at a call centre by her mother. What happened when she got home was witnessed by her younger siblings. According to testimony later heard in court, her parents confronted her about her lifestyle, wearing t-shirts, talking to boys. The argument escalated. Fazana turned to Iftikhar and said, "Just end it here." Both parents pushed Shafilya down onto the sofa. Iftikhar forced a plastic bag into her mouth. The siblings watched. Shafilya struggled. Then she stopped. After she was dead, her body was beaten and dismembered. Iftikhar drove it 70 miles north to Cumbria and dumped it near the River Kent, stripped of identifying features. The family went home and carried on with their lives. It was Shafilya's teachers who eventually reported her missing, not her parents. When cameras arrived, Iftikhar and Fazana stepped into frame and gave exactly the performance you would expect. They appealed, they cried, they cooperated with media campaigns. The image presented to the country was of a family torn apart by an unexplained disappearance. Police were not convinced. Within weeks, detectives had identified the most likely scenario. In November 2003, while Shafilya was still formally listed as missing, they secretly installed a listening device inside the Ahmed family home. What they heard was not a grieving family. It was a family managing a cover-up. Fazana was recorded telling one of her children, "If the slightest thing comes out of your mouth, we will be stuck in real trouble." Iftikhar was recorded asking what police would find in the car. In another recording, he said of the media attention they had courted, "By getting the support of newspapers, you can get away with murder." Both parents and 5 family members were arrested in December 2003 on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. All were released without charge. In February 2004, workers discovered Shafilya's dismembered remains in the River Kent during heavy flooding. She was identified through dental records and jewellery. A gold zigzag bracelet and a blue topaz ring her parents confirmed belonged to her. The cause of death could not be determined due to the advanced state of decomposition. The case stalled for years. The break came in August 2010, 7 years after Shafilya died. Her younger sister Alicia was arrested in connection with an armed robbery at the family home. During questioning, Alicia broke. She had been in the room the night Shafilya was killed. She had watched it happen as a child and carried it for 7 years. Iftikhar and Fazana were charged with murder in September 2011. The trial began at Chester Crown Court in May 2012. Alicia took the witness stand and described the confrontation, her mother's words, both parents pushing Shafilya down, the plastic bag, the struggle, the silence. She described 5 years of daily physical abuse, a kitchen incident where her parents held a knife to Shafilya's plait to frighten her, and the night of the murder as frantic, out of control. Midway through the trial, Fazana changed her story and claimed she had tried to intervene while Iftikhar attacked Shafilya. The jury did not accept this. On August 3, 2012, nearly 9 years after Shafilya was killed, both parents were found guilty of her murder and sentenced to life with a minimum of 25 years. As the verdict was read, Iftikhar turned and cursed at police officers nearby. Shafilya Ahmed's birthday, July 14th, is now the National Day of Memory for victims of honour-based violence in the UK. She was going to be a lawyer. Instead, the last words she heard from her parents were an instruction to finish it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Not every parent who kills hides what they've done with tears and media appearances. Sometimes the performance is more calculated. A suspect who shows up, helps search, answers every question, and gives every outward sign of innocence for so long that detectives begin to doubt themselves. In the next case, that act lasted years before a single piece of evidence brought the whole thing down. Tyler Tessier, 2017, Maryland, USA. Laura Wallen had just been named Teacher of the Year at Wild Lake High School in Howard County, Maryland. She taught social studies and law. She was 31 years old, 4 months pregnant, and by every account her students and colleagues gave, the kind of teacher who stayed after class, who knew every student's name, who showed up fully every single day. When she went missing in September 2017, her community mobilized immediately. Students made signs, neighbors handed out flyers, friends organized searches, and her boyfriend stood in front of the cameras and begged for her safe return. The last time anyone outside of Tyler Tessier saw Laura Wallen alive was on the afternoon of Saturday, September 2nd, 2017, on surveillance footage at a Safeway grocery store near her home in Olney, Maryland. The two of them were caught on camera together, shopping. That was the last confirmed sighting. That same afternoon, Laura sent a text to her sister. Tyler had taken her somewhere in Damascus, she wrote, out to an open field in the middle of nowhere, and she wasn't sure why. Her sister told her to take a picture of where she was. She did. She photographed a wide field with a tree line in the distance. That photograph would eventually help investigators locate her grave. On September 3rd, the night after that text, Tessier sent a message to an acquaintance asking for a ride to Baltimore. He said he needed help to clean up a mess. The acquaintance declined. On September 4th, Laura's family received several text messages from her phone. The messages were strange in tone and content. One said she was about 95% sure Tyler was not the father of her baby. Another said she was probably going to lose her job. A third said Tyler was a great guy and that she knew she had really hurt his feelings. These texts were designed to cast doubt on the pregnancy, muddy the paternity question, and generate sympathy for Tessier. Police would later confirm that every one of those messages had been sent by Tessier himself from Laura's phone, after she was already dead. When Laura failed to show up for the first day of the school year and hadn't arranged a substitute teacher, something her father said she would never have done deliberately, her family knew immediately something was seriously wrong. She was reported missing. Montgomery County Police launched an investigation and within hours had identified Tessier as a person of interest. He had given investigators inconsistent statements. He had admitted to driving Laura's car to an apartment complex in Columbia and removing its front license plate. He had admitted to disposing of her driver's license and iPhone, and detectives had the text he sent asking someone to help him clean up a mess. They had enough to be certain, but they didn't yet have a body. So when Wallen's family asked to hold a press conference on September 11th, 9 days after Laura disappeared, police made a deliberate decision. They knew Tessier had already been lying. They knew he would almost certainly agree to speak publicly, and they wanted to watch him do it. Montgomery County Police Chief Tom Manger later confirmed that allowing Tessier to appear at the press conference was a calculated investigative decision made in coordination with the family. Laura's parents knew detectives suspected him. Her mother agreed to sit beside him and hold his hand anyway. Her father later said it was the hardest thing his wife had ever done. Tessier sat down at that press conference with Gwen Wallen, Laura's mother, holding her hand. He breathed heavily. His voice broke, his face twisted into expressions of grief and disbelief. He said Laura was super excited for the start of the school year. He said they had gone to doctor's appointments together and that she was happy about the pregnancy. He looked into the cameras and said, "We haven't slept, we haven't eaten, we're just looking. We're praying that you're safe. I'm asking you to just let us know that you're safe. If somebody has her, please understand that you've taken away a huge person in so many people's lives." He also said directly to Laura, as if she might be watching, "Laura, if you're listening, it doesn't matter what's happened. It doesn't matter what type of trouble. There's nothing we can't fix together." 2 days later, Laura's body was found in a shallow grave on a private farm near Price's Distillery Road in Damascus. The photograph she had taken from the field on September 2nd matched the location almost exactly. Cadaver dogs and a search and rescue team found her around noon on September 13th. An autopsy confirmed she had been shot in the back of the head. Investigators established that Tessier had returned to that field at least 10 times in the 9 days between Laura's death and the discovery of her body, visiting the grave repeatedly while simultaneously standing before cameras, weeping for her return. Police arrested Tyler Tessier at 5:30 p.m. on September 13, 2017, the same day Laura's body was found. He was charged with first-degree murder, altering physical evidence, and making a false statement to police. He was denied bail and remanded to the Montgomery County Correctional Facility. What investigators unravelled over the following months completed the picture. Tessier had been secretly living with another woman the entire time he was dating Laura. He was engaged to her. Both women knew the other existed, but each believed they were his primary relationship. When Laura became pregnant, the situation became unmanageable. Tessier was also not charged with the death of the unborn child. Under Maryland law at the time, the fetus at 13 weeks was not considered viable outside the womb, and no second murder charge could be brought. Laura's father, Mark Wallen, described it plainly at a later press conference. A monster with one bullet had killed 2 generations of their family. Laura's parents began campaigning for a change in Maryland law, a bill they named Laura and Reed's Law, Reed being the name Laura had chosen for her son. Tessier's trial was scheduled to begin on September 4, 2018, almost exactly 1 year after the murder. Jury selection took place on September 4th and 5th. Opening arguments were set for September 6th. At approximately 5:10 a.m. on the morning those arguments were due to begin, Tessier was found dead in his cell at the correctional facility. He had used a bedsheet. The trial judge informed the assembled jury that the defendant was dead and that there would be no proceedings. The case was closed without a conviction being formally recorded. Montgomery County State's Attorney John McCarthy stood before reporters that morning and called Tessier a psychopath. He said that to Tyler Tessier, lying was like breathing, that there were so many stories, so many lies, so many versions of what he claimed had happened that prosecutors had lost count. He said the public had been robbed of the opportunity to hear the full truth about the nature of what Tessier had done. Laura's brother-in-law said Tessier had stood their family up for the last time. The press conference footage still exists. Tessier sitting beside Laura's grieving mother, holding her hand. Her father standing 2 feet away, already knowing who had done it, watching a man perform grief for cameras while his daughter lay in a field nearby. Laura Wallen was Teacher of the Year. Tyler Tessier shot her in the back of the head and then went home and sent text messages from her phone to frame her. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Some killers disappear before justice catches them. Others sit in a courtroom and maintain their innocence so long and so convincingly that the people who knew the victim begin to wonder if they've had it wrong all along. In the next case, the suspect did exactly that, for years, until the moment a single, unexpected witness walked into a police station and changed everything. Keli Abrahams, 2010, Sydney, Australia. On the morning of Sunday, August 1st, 2010, Keli Abrahams called emergency services in Sydney, Australia. Her daughter Keisha was gone, she said. She had woken up to find the front door open and the 6-year-old missing. Keisha was blonde with blue eyes, she told the operator. She was wearing pajamas. Abraham's voice broke throughout the call. There were sobs. There were pauses. To a casual listener, she sounded like a mother in distress. Analysts who later examined the call noticed something else. There was no searching. A panicked parent on the phone with emergency services moves. They check rooms. They call out their child's name. They ask neighbours. They run. Abrahams did none of this. She waited, passively, for questions. And she told the operator she had just woken up, then said she had looked everywhere. 2 statements that directly contradicted each other. The truth leaked through the performance before the first responders had even arrived. "She's not here," Abrahams said at one point. Not, "I don't know where she is." Not, "I can't find her." "She's not here." exactly as someone would say it if they already knew where she was. Keisha Weipart had been dead for 2 weeks by the time that call was made. Police arrived at the family's unit in Mount Druitt, a suburb in Sydney's outer west, where Abrahams lived with her partner Robert Smith and her younger daughter, 3-year-old Brianna. Detectives immediately noticed the home was unusually clean. When they searched the property, they found traces of Keisha's blood throughout the unit. On the wooden frame of Keisha's bed, they found teeth marks. Officers installed a recording device in the apartment and left. Days later, Abrahams returned, and the first thing she was recorded saying was, "They've taken her mattress. They'll only find her piss and shit on it." For a mother supposedly desperate to find her missing child, those were not the words of someone who believed Keisha was out there somewhere, alive, waiting to be found. But Abrahams and Smith kept the act going publicly. In front of television cameras, Abrahams stood and wept so hard she could barely get words out. She asked anyone who had seen Keisha to please contact police. Smith stood beside her and told reporters, "Last time I saw her we were watching a movie together, you know? Someone must know something. Please come forward. She's beautiful, you know? Funny, always happy." The community responded exactly as they intended. Neighbours rallied. People organised searches. Public sympathy poured toward the couple. What had actually happened was this. On the night of July 13th, 2010, nearly 3 weeks before Abrahams called police, Keisha had refused to put on her pyjamas. That was the trigger. Abrahams hit her daughter. According to what she would later admit to an undercover police officer, she kicked Keisha, causing the child to fall and strike her head. Keisha went limp. She felt, Abrahams would later say, like jelly. Instead of calling an ambulance, Abrahams put her daughter to bed. Keisha died overnight. Both Abrahams and Smith knew the child was dying. Neither of them called for help. The autopsy, conducted only after Keisha's remains were eventually recovered, told a far more brutal story than a single kick. Keisha had sustained 10 separate injuries to her head, jaw, and body. Her teeth showed fractures consistent with being struck with significant force. The court later heard that various family members, neighbours, and associates all knew Keisha had frequently appeared with bruises across different parts of her body. Abrahams had been seen hitting and screaming at her daughter on multiple occasions. Keisha used to flinch visibly whenever her mother raised an arm, even in casual conversation. This had been going on for years, and multiple systems had already tried and failed to stop it. Abrahams herself had been raised in a household of severe violence. As a child, she had written a list at the age of 11, documenting things she had witnessed and experienced. Her father strangling her mother, her father hitting her while her mother was at work, bruises across her body. The cycle of abuse that killed Keisha had roots going back decades. At 19, Abrahams had a son who died of sudden infant death syndrome at 6 weeks old. Keisha was born the following year. Keisha's father, Chris Weipart, had reported Abrahams to police for biting Keisha on the shoulder when the child was very young. Abrahams was convicted of that offence. She and Weipart separated. Keisha was placed first with her father, then into government care. 18 months later, Keisha was returned to Abrahams, who was by then living with Robert Smith. Within a year, Keisha was taken to hospital with facial bruising. She was 3 years old. When asked about a cigarette burn on her body, she said her mum did that. Keisha was not removed from the home. By the time she started school, she had attended just 4 days of classes. Abrahams kept her home to hide her injuries. Education officers who attempted home visits were turned away at the door. Shortly before Keisha died, the Department of Education had informed Abrahams they would be taking legal action over Keisha's chronic non-attendance. The sentencing judge would later say that her death was a foreseeable and preventable consequence of foreseeable and preventable causes. After Keisha died, Smith put her body in a suitcase. It remained in the home for several days. Then he took it to bushland west of Mount Druitt, doused it in petrol, set it on fire, and buried the remains in a shallow grave dug with a hammer. Both of them then threw away their clothing, shoes, and mobile phone SIM cards to destroy evidence. 3 weeks later, Abrahams called the police to report her daughter missing. Police treated Abrahams and Smith as suspects from the start, but without a body and without a confession, the case stalled. In December 2010, detectives launched a 9-month undercover operation. 2 officers spent months befriending the couple, gaining their trust. On the evening of April 21, 2011, meeting with the undercover officers at a hotel in Sydney, Abrahams confessed. She described kicking Keisha, watching her fall, knowing she was badly hurt, and choosing not to call anyone. The undercover officers recorded everything. The following night was April 22nd. It would have been Keisha's 7th birthday. Abrahams and Smith led the undercover officers to the burial site in the bushland. When they arrived and turned to leave, detectives Russell Oxford and Andrew Marks were waiting. Both were arrested on the spot and taken to Mount Druitt police station. Keisha's remains were recovered from the shallow grave. What was left of her was identified and returned to her family. In July 2013, Keli Abrahams pleaded guilty to murder and interfering with a corpse. She was sentenced to 22 years and 6 months, with a minimum non-parole period of 16 years. The judge noted Abraham's own history of abuse as a mitigating factor, but was clear that nothing justified what she had done. Robert Smith pleaded guilty to manslaughter by gross criminal negligence and being an accessory after the fact to murder. He was sentenced to a minimum of 12 years. He was released on parole in 2023 and will serve the remainder of his sentence in the community under strict conditions, including being prohibited from entering the areas of Penrith or Blacktown where Keisha had lived. Abrahams showed no emotion as she was led from the courtroom. Supporters of Keisha, some wearing shirts reading, "We say no parole for child killers," shouted abuse from the public gallery. Outside, Keisha's grandmother Liz Weipart told reporters, "It's finally over and done with, and she can sit there and rot." The cameras that Abrahams had cried in front of in August 2010 were the same cameras that broadcast her sentencing 3 years later. The performance had bought her time. It had not bought her freedom. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Some killers count on grief being accepted at face value. Others take a different approach. They build such a convincing facade of innocence over such a long period that investigators find themselves working with almost no physical evidence at all, forced to reconstruct an entire crime from fragments. In the next case, the suspect was so careful, so deliberate, and so composed that his unravelling came from one of the most unlikely places imaginable. Neil Archer, 2015, South Australia, Australia. On the evening of August 26, 2015, Jodie Myers left a surprise birthday party for her stepfather in Burdett, a small rural settlement east of Adelaide in South Australia. She was 20 years old, with a 2-year-old son named Elijah. She left the party with her fiancé, Neil Archer. Nobody outside of Neil and his mother would see Jodie alive again. The relationship had been unravelling for months. Jodie had confided in her family that she wanted to leave Neil. She was done. Her mother and sisters had been supportive, and Neil had noticed. He was convinced her family were actively working to pull them apart. When Jodie's brother-in-law Michael Bates tried to have a calm conversation with Neil about the relationship and suggested he either work through it or end it, Neil didn't pause. There was no thinking it over. He looked at Michael and said with a cold, flat expression, "I'll kill her." That conversation happened months before the party. Nobody who heard it treated it as a serious threat. It was the kind of thing people say, they told themselves. It wasn't. On the night of the party, Neil sat in his car in the driveway for the entire evening and refused to come inside. He wouldn't speak to Jodie's family. He wouldn't accept food from Jodie when she brought some out. Whatever had been building between them had reached a point where he couldn't maintain even the appearance of civility. When Jodie left with him that night, the argument continued. At some point during that drive, Neil Archer strangled Jodie to death, using the cord from the grey hoodie he was wearing. He then drove to his parents' property in the small riverfront town of Mannum and buried her body in a shallow grave beneath the floor of his father's tool shed. His father Lawrence was away in Tasmania. His mother Margaret was home. The next morning, August 27th, Neil and Margaret drove to Jodie's bank together. Margaret used Jodie's ATM card to withdraw $250 cash. They then drove to a Bunnings hardware store and used that money to buy cement, 600 kilograms of it. Back at the property, Neil covered Jodi's grave with a freshly poured concrete slab. He did a poor job of it. The concrete was uneven and badly finished. When Lawrence Archer returned home from Tasmania days later and discovered the shed floor had been concreted without him asking for it, he was confused and told people it looked terrible. Neil explained it cheerfully. He and Margaret had done it as an early Father's Day surprise. Lawrence told police that explanation just wasn't in Neil's character. The concrete was one of the first things that caught investigators' attention. That same morning, after the bank and the hardware store, Jodi's mother Lucy received a text message from her daughter's phone number. The message said Jodi had left Neil, she'd gone off with friends, and she'd be in touch. Lucy told police she knew immediately it wasn't from Jodi. Jodi would never have left without Elijah. She wouldn't have walked away from her 2-year-old son and sent a casual text about it. Margaret had sent the message from Jodi's phone. Within days of the disappearance, Neil and Margaret Archer appeared on television. They stood together in front of cameras, appealing to the public, appealing directly to Jodi, begging her to come home. Neil said he wouldn't be the man he was today if it wasn't for her. He said they just wanted to know she was safe. He filmed multiple broadcasts over the following weeks, sometimes with Margaret standing beside him, both of them with visible emotion, both of them asking the nation for help, finding the woman they had buried meters away under a badly poured concrete slab. Margaret spoke to reporters too. She rubbed her eyes on camera. She talked about Elijah, about how the little boy needed his mother, about how they all missed her. The prosecutor, who would later stand up in court and play that footage for a judge, described what Margaret did on those broadcasts with 2 words: crocodile tears. Watching the footage back, observers noted that despite the hand movements, despite the voice breaking, there were no actual tears on Margaret Archer's face. Police were building their case quietly. The CCTV from Bunnings showing Margaret buying 600 kilograms of cement was found. The ATM withdrawal from Jodi's card the day after she disappeared was confirmed. Surveillance recordings captured in the weeks before Neil's arrest revealed he was not grieving. He was calculating. He was heard discussing what police would find and how he would respond when they came for him. The judge at his sentencing noted explicitly that at no point during the investigation did Neil ask officers how the search was going or express any concern that Jodi was still missing. 2-year-old Elijah was inside Margaret's house while his mother's body lay in the unfinished grave in the backyard. The court heard that while Neil was outside covering the grave with concrete, the toddler was inside the house looking for his mama. The break came through the one person Neil had told the truth to. He had confessed to his brother Aaron. He described what he had done and told Aaron where Jodi was. Aaron asked him how he had killed her. Neil told him he had strangled her. Aaron told his brother he needed to turn himself in. When Neil didn't, Aaron went to police. Detectives arrived at the Manham property and began excavating the shed floor. Jodi's body was found in the shallow grave beneath the concrete. The hoodie cord Neil had used to strangle her was still around her neck, the same hoodie he had been wearing during his television appeals for her return. Neil Archer was arrested at 1 a.m. on September 25, 2015, at an agreed location and taken to Murray Bridge Police Station, where he was charged with murder. He was refused bail. At his committal hearing in December 2016, he pleaded guilty. At sentencing in June 2017, Justice Trish Kelly described Archer as a controlling individual who believed he owned his partner's life. She quoted the statement he had made to Michael Bates months before the murder, that he would just kill her, and said it spoke volumes about his mindset. The mandatory sentence was life imprisonment. The non-parole period was set at 22 years, backdated to the date of his arrest in September 2015. Margaret Archer was sentenced separately in the South Australian District Court after pleading guilty to 1 count of assisting an offender. The prosecutor told the judge her role was not submissive and not isolated. It was a continuation of deliberate actions and lies to help her son escape justice. She was sentenced to 6 years. She later faced deportation proceedings due to her conviction, and as of 2023 had had a deportation order reversed on appeal. Elijah was 2 years old when his mother was killed and buried in his grandmother's backyard. Neil told Lawrence it was a Father's Day surprise. He stood in front of cameras and asked Jodi to come home. The cord was still around her neck. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Some killers are caught because a family member comes forward. Others are caught because they can't stop making mistakes, leaving a trail that only becomes visible in hindsight. Each piece unremarkable on its own, but devastating when assembled together. The next case is one where the suspect sat in a live television interview and fell apart in real time, in a moment so strange that millions of people who watched it knew, before any evidence was announced, that something was deeply wrong. Darren Vickers, 1997, Manchester, England. It was Bank Holiday Monday, May 5th, 1997, and 8-year-old Jamie Lavis had the day off school. He lived in Openshaw, Greater Manchester, and like a lot of kids his age on a free day, he headed out on his own. He ended up boarding the number 219 bus towards Stalybridge. His driver that day was a 27-year-old man named Darren Vickers. Jamie never came home. What Vickers had actually done that day was groom Jamie across an entire day of bus routes, letting the boy hand out tickets to passengers, count change. Passengers later told police that Jamie had been running up and down the aisle, cheerful and chatty, a child clearly enjoying the attention. Vickers had spent hours making himself seem like the most interesting adult Jamie had ever met. At the end of his shift, he persuaded Jamie to get into his car and drove him to Reddish Vale, a stretch of park and woodland on the eastern edge of Manchester. What happened there would later become the centre of a devastating investigation. Vickers attacked Jamie and ultimately took his life. He then left the boy's body hidden in the undergrowth before returning home. The exact cause of death was never conclusively established. In a later statement to a cellmate, Vickers claimed that Jamie had simply stopped breathing and that he had panicked. The court did not accept that explanation. The judge was clear in his verdict. Vickers had manipulated the child's trust, carried out a violent crime, and left him alone in the woods. When Jamie failed to return home that evening, his parents, John Lavis and Karen Spooner, immediately raised the alarm. Within days, Vickers came forward voluntarily. He told officers he was the last person to see Jamie, that the boy had apparently wandered off somewhere in Ashton. He presented himself as a concerned man, shaken, wanting to help. The Lavis family took him at his word and let him in. Vickers inserted himself completely into the search. He brought food to the family, he sat with them, he helped look after their other children. He drove in searches extending up to 15 miles from the family home. He stood beside soup wagons with them, waiting. Karen Spooner described him as their pillar of strength, the man who kept them going. He spoke to the media on their behalf, appeared on television holding a photograph of Jamie, making public appeals for information. He moved into the Lavis family home. He ate at their table. He slept in their house. At one point, he asked them to become godparents to the child his common-law wife was expecting. One photograph taken during that period shows Vickers bare-chested, sitting between Jamie's parents with his arms spread wide around each of them. Forensic psychologist Keri Danes, who analysed the image years later for a television documentary, described it as the most bizarre photograph she had ever seen in the context of a criminal case. Where Jamie should be, right in the middle of the picture, is Darren Vickers. Police were suspicious from the start. Detective Constable Mohammed Asif said he knew Vickers was responsible the first time he met him. The problem was evidence. Vickers had a police scanner and regularly turned up at newly identified search locations before the investigating team arrived, using his access to the family to stay ahead of what police were finding. Every television interview was watched by investigators who noted how he rarely used Jamie's name, referring to him instead as the child or the boy, a linguistic distancing that analysts later flagged as significant. Investigators also dug into his employment history and found his references were almost all fake. The one legitimate one was from a convicted paedophile. In September 1997, 4 months after Jamie's disappearance, 2 teenagers came forward. A man had approached them near Reddish Vale Park and tried to lure them into the woods, claiming he had found Jamie and showing them a photograph. They made an excuse and left. When they saw Vickers on television, they contacted police immediately. That was the man. Investigators returned to Reddish Vale with the teenagers and searched the area they indicated. In a dense wooded clearing about half a mile from the main path, officers found a dark blue tracksuit and a green child's jacket, matching the clothes Jamie had been wearing the day he disappeared. As the clothing was dried and examined in a forensic laboratory, officers found a small jawbone tangled in the fabric. DNA testing from the milk teeth confirmed it was Jamie. A child's torso was found nearby. His head and limbs were never recovered. Vickers was arrested and charged with abduction. The Lavis family, who had attended a party for him when he was released without charge during an earlier arrest, were devastated. John Lavis told reporters he had never doubted Darren for a single moment. During trial at Manchester Crown Court, Vickers denied everything and launched a series of counter-allegations to deflect blame. He claimed he had been having an affair with Karen Spooner during the months he lived with the family. Karen denied this absolutely and had a DNA test conducted on her child to disprove it publicly. Vickers also attempted to implicate Jamie's father John in the killing. The judge called this out directly at sentencing, describing John Lavis as a decent, hard-working man whose family had been exploited by Vickers at every turn. The jury returned unanimous guilty verdicts on both abduction and murder. Mr. Justice Forbes told Vickers these were truly wicked crimes, an extremely depraved and cruel attack on a defenceless child, and noted that he had lied and lied and lied throughout the entire investigation. The sentence was life imprisonment with a minimum of 25 years. Darren Vickers became eligible for parole consideration in 2022. The parole board denied his release. The senior investigating officer said publicly that Vickers would be a danger to children for the rest of his life and should never be released. Jamie's grandmother said he was streetwise, but a lovely little boy. The judge used her words as his final epitaph. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Some killers take months to be exposed. Others unravel in a single moment, live on television, in front of an interviewer who knows exactly which questions to ask, watching a suspect's composure collapse in real time. In the next case, the press conference wasn't designed to generate leads. It was designed to produce exactly that kind of moment. Steven McDaniel, 2011, Georgia, USA. Lauren Giddings had worked for everything she had. She grew up in Maryland as the eldest of 3 sisters and was the first in her family to attend college. She graduated from Agnes Scott College, then earned a place at Mercer University School of Law in Macon, Georgia, where she was known as someone who lit up every room she walked into. By the summer of 2011, she had graduated and was spending her days preparing for the Georgia bar exam, after which she planned to start her career as a public defender. Her friends described her as infectious. She was 27 years old. The man who had been watching her through her window for 2 years lived next door. Steven McDaniel had been Lauren's neighbour and classmate since they both moved into the Barrister Hall apartment complex near the law school in fall 2008. Both had been involved in the Mercer chapter of the Federalist Society, Lauren as president, McDaniel as vice president. To the people around them, they were simply 2 law school graduates living in the same small building. McDaniel presented himself as quiet and mild-mannered, a little awkward but unremarkable. What was happening inside his apartment was a different story. McDaniel had been breaking into Lauren's apartment repeatedly before the murder. He had filmed her from outside her window. He had stolen items. He had a master key that gave him access to every unit in the building. On internet forums and blogs, police would later find posts in which he wrote about his hatred of women and his desire to hurt them. The district attorney who prosecuted the case would say plainly that McDaniel's dream was to commit murder and get away with it. He had been working toward it for a long time. On the night of Thursday, June 23, 2011, Lauren sent an email to her boyfriend David, who was on a golf trip in California. She told him she thought someone had tried to break in. She described it as probably just Macon hoodlums and downplayed it. That email was the last one she sent him. In the early hours of Sunday, June 26th, McDaniel used his master key to enter Lauren's apartment. He was wearing a mask and gloves. He stood over her while she slept. A creak in the bed woke her. She pulled the mask off his face and looked at him. She said, "Steven, please stop." He jumped on her and strangled her with his bare hands. She fought. He was stronger. When she stopped moving, He dragged her body to the bathroom, went back to his apartment, and returned the following night with a hacksaw. He dismembered her body in the bathtub. He placed her limbs in dumpsters around the campus. He put her torso in a trash can outside the apartment building. When police later applied luminol to Lauren's bathroom, the entire bathtub lit up. The investigator who described it said it was like a light switch. The glow went almost 2 inches from the top of the tub. For 3 days, nobody outside McDaniel's apartment knew anything had happened. Lauren's friends had assumed she was deep in bar exam study mode and not picking up her phone. Her sister Caitlin first noticed the silence on June 27th. By June 29th, nobody in Lauren's circle had heard from her, and Caitlin contacted Macon police to report her missing. Her father drove overnight from Maryland to Georgia to file the report in person. On June 30th, 2011, local news station WGXA sent a camera crew to the Barrister Hall complex. Neighbours and friends were gathering. Reporters began conducting interviews. Steven McDaniel walked outside, positioned himself in front of a camera, and began talking about his missing neighbour. He described Lauren as nice as can be. He said she was very personable. He said he was worried about her. His voice carried exactly the right weight of concern. He was a law student, calm and articulate, giving a measured interview about a fellow classmate who had gone missing. And then the reporter told him that a body had been found nearby. The change was immediate and visible and strange. "Body?" McDaniel said. His voice shifted, his face changed. He said he thought he needed to sit down. He appeared to buckle. He ended the interview and walked away. The clip was broadcast and then shared online, where it has been watched millions of times. People watching it described the reaction as wrong, not in the way a person collapses when they hear devastating news, but in the way someone performs collapsing. The pause before the word landed, the deliberate quality of the response. Body language analysts who later examined the footage said McDaniel appeared to be processing information rather than experiencing shock, calculating how he was supposed to react rather than actually reacting. What McDaniel didn't know in that moment was that investigators had already noticed the smell coming from the trash can outside the building before the reporter told him anything. His torso was already in evidence bags. The news was out before he knew it was out. That same evening, McDaniel went to Macon police station with other neighbours and friends of Lauren to give statements. Every other person in the building voluntarily allowed police to search their apartment. McDaniel refused. He told officers it was the lawyer in him, that he was always protective of his space. Investigators noted this. They noted everything about him. Homicide investigators who worked the case later said McDaniel had seemed like he was almost trying to be too helpful, that they felt certain from the beginning he was responsible, and that he appeared to believe he was smarter than everyone in the room. After significant pressure, McDaniel eventually consented to a search. Police found a master key to the entire building in his bedroom. They found a second key, cut specifically to fit Lauren's apartment. They found packaging for a hacksaw, the same brand and size as the hacksaw they subsequently recovered from a supply closet in the building, which tested positive for human blood. They found underwear belonging to Lauren. They found his laptop, on which they discovered videos he had filmed of himself filming Lauren through her window on the night of the murder. Footage that proved the killing was premeditated, not impulsive. McDaniel was arrested initially on a burglary charge after admitting he had entered 2 neighbours' apartments and stolen condoms. The murder charge followed on August 2nd, 2011. During a 12-hour police interrogation that night, McDaniel sat almost completely still for the entire session. Officers shifted in their seats, leaned forward, leaned back. McDaniel barely moved at all. He answered questions with 2 words or not at all. He said, "I don't know," so many times, and in such a flat, deliberate way, that investigators described it as one of the most unsettling interviews they had ever conducted. His trial was scheduled for 2014. Days before it began, McDaniel accepted a plea deal. In exchange for pleading guilty to murder and providing a full written account of what he had done, he would receive a life sentence, and prosecutors would not seek the death penalty. The judge at sentencing called the crime truly evil. A friend of Lauren's read a statement directly to McDaniel. "You are the devil." The judge also dismissed additional charges that had emerged during the investigation, 1 count of burglary, and 30 counts of child sexual exploitation found on his devices. In his written confession, McDaniel described entering Lauren's apartment, watching her sleep, the moment she woke up and recognized him, and what he did next. Investigators believed the account was incomplete and that he withheld details even in his guilty plea. He did have a lot of time to prepare that letter, one investigator said. I'm sure there are things he's never going to tell. Lauren Giddings' remains, apart from the torso, were never found. McDaniel is currently held at Hancock State Prison in Sparta, Georgia. He will not be eligible for parole until 2041. In 2018, he attempted to have his conviction vacated, arguing that his constitutional rights had been violated during the investigation. The appeal was denied. The WGXA interview clip still exists. It is 4 minutes long. In it, a man who had dismembered his neighbour 4 days earlier stands in front of a camera and talks about how worried he is. Then someone tells him what he already knew, and he performs the moment of learning it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Some killers are meticulous planners, brought down by a single piece of evidence they could not control. Others walk straight into the trap by trying to appear too helpful, too present, too eager to be seen as the concerned one. In the next case, the suspect did both, and what finally ended the deception was a secret recorded conversation between two friends that the killer never imagined anyone would hear. Neil Entwistle, 2006, Massachusetts, USA. From the outside, Neil and Rachel Entwistle had built exactly the kind of life that looks good in photographs. Neil had grown up working class in Worksop near Nottingham in England, the son of a coal miner and a school canteen cook. He had worked his way to a master's degree in electronic engineering at the University of York, where he met Rachel Souza, an American student on a year abroad. They fell in love, married in August 2003, and moved to Worcestershire, where Rachel worked as an English and drama teacher at a Catholic high school. In April 2005, their daughter Lillian Rose was born. They called her Lily Bean. That autumn, they decided to try America for a while. Rachel's mother and stepfather, Priscilla and Joseph Matarazzo, lived in Carver, Massachusetts, and welcomed the young family into their home, while Neil and Rachel found their own place. In early January 2006, they moved into a 4-bedroom house on a quiet cul-de-sac in Hopkinton, 26 miles west of Boston. They had been there 10 days. Rachel believed Neil was earning $10,000 a month from an offshore account set up by a previous employer, and that he ran a successful online consulting business. He had told her this. None of it was true. Neil Entwistle had been unemployed since September 2005. He had more than $30,000 in credit card debt. He was under investigation by eBay for running fraudulent transactions. The businesses he claimed to operate were spam operations, get-rich-quick emails, fake software sales, adult content schemes. Rachel had no idea. She was at home with Lillian, preparing to look for teaching work, trusting entirely the version of their finances that her husband had given her. On January 16, 2006, 4 days before the murders, someone using the laptop in the Hopkinton house searched the phrase, "how to kill people by various methods," and browsed escort service websites in the local area. The following afternoon, January 17th, the same laptop was used to search knife in neck kill, quick suicide method, and euthanasia. The searches were later matched to Neil Entwistle. On the night of Thursday, January 19th, Rachel was alive. She had spoken with her family by phone. The next morning, January 20th, Neil took a .22 caliber handgun he had taken from his father-in-law, Joseph Matarazzo's home in Carver, without permission. Matarazzo had taught him to shoot it during target practice, and he went into the master bedroom where Rachel and 9-month-old Lillian were lying in bed together. He shot Rachel in the head above the hairline. The bullet that passed through Lillian's torso then lodged above Rachel's left breast. Both were still in their pajamas. He covered them with bedding. He drove the gun back to Matarazzo's home in Carver, returned it to where it was stored, and left. At approximately 5 a.m. on January 22nd, 2 days after the murders, Neil Entwistle arrived at Logan International Airport in Boston. He purchased a one-way ticket on British Airways for the 8:15 a.m. flight to London. He did not tell anyone in Rachel's family where he was going. He did not call the police. He did not report his wife and daughter missing, or dead, or anything at all. He got on the plane and flew home to his parents' house in Worksop. That same day, January 22nd, police officers went to the Hopkinton house after Rachel's friend reported she hadn't been able to reach her. Officers walked through the house. A dog was in a crate, the television was on, a radio was playing in the baby's room. The master bedroom door was open. One officer stepped in, saw a large bed with a comforter heaped on top, and did not investigate further. They left without finding Rachel and Lillian, who were under the bedding the entire time. Officers returned the following day and detected a smell. On their second thorough search, they found the bodies. Rachel and Lillian were lying with their arms intertwined, already 2 days dead. The bullet wound in Rachel's head was so small, it had gone undetected during the first examination. Forensic chemists needed several hours and had to move Rachel's body before they could confirm that Lillian had also been shot. In England, Neil Entwistle met up with old friends from university. They went drinking, they saw a film, they discussed where he might live. He told them he had come home to find Rachel and Lillian dead and had fled in distress. He did not contact Massachusetts State Police. Police tracked him down, and on January 23rd, a trooper named Robert Manning called him at his parents' house. During that 2-hour telephone conversation, Entwistle said he had returned from a shopping trip on the morning of January 20th and found his wife and baby dead. He said he had picked up a kitchen knife and considered killing himself, but put it down. He said he had then driven the gun back to Matarazzo's house to preserve Rachel's honour, that he wanted her not to be remembered as someone who had taken her own life. He said he had fled to England to be with his family because he was overwhelmed with grief. When the trooper told him that Rachel and Lillian's deaths were being treated as suspicious, Entwistle's response was a single word: "OK." On February 8, 2006, extradition officers from London's Metropolitan Police arrested Neil Entwistle at Royal Oak Tube Station. When he was returned to Massachusetts on February 15th, he was handcuffed and in leg shackles. Rachel and Lillian's funeral had already taken place. More than 500 people attended the Plymouth church where Lillian had been baptised just 7 weeks earlier. Entwistle was not there. Rachel and Lillian were buried together in a single coffin in Kingston, Massachusetts, under the surname Sousa. Lillian's birth and death certificates were later amended to read Father Unknown. When Entwistle was arrested, he had 3 items on him: a 1-page eulogy he had written for Rachel, a torn page from a British tabloid advertising escort and prostitution services, and a draft letter written in a spiral notebook in which he pretended to be a close friend of Neil Entwistle and offered to sell the full story of the case to the highest bidder. He had not yet finished writing it. The trial began on June 2, 2008 at Middlesex Superior Court in Woburn. The prosecution called more than 40 witnesses over 12 days. The defence called none. Neil Entwistle did not testify. The only time the court heard his voice was in the recording of his phone conversation with Trooper Manning from January 23rd. On June 13th, the prosecution played a 20-minute crime scene video. The room went silent. Jurors stared at the monitors. When the footage showed Rachel and Lillian in the bedroom, their heads almost touching, Lillian still in her mother's arms, Neil Entwistle clutched his mouth, gritted his teeth, and began to cry. His face moved in ways that reporters present described as somewhere between grief and grimace. His mother Yvonne wept in the gallery. His defence lawyers told the media their client was seriously grieving and that there was no other way to read what they were watching. The Boston Herald described his expressions as contortions that seemed half grimace, half grin. The defence's theory was that Rachel had killed Lillian and then shot herself, that this was a murder-suicide committed by a depressed mother, and that Neil had returned the gun to Matarazzo's house to protect her reputation. Forensic evidence destroyed this claim piece by piece. Rachel had been shot in the head at close range. Ballistics and wound analysis showed she could not physically have held the gun in the position required to inflict that entry wound on herself. Neil's DNA was on the gun's grip. Rachel's DNA was inside the muzzle. The gunshot wounds were so small and so carefully placed that investigators and the district attorney Both noted they were not visible without close inspection, a level of deliberateness that contradicted any theory of panic or accident. During deliberations, one juror, who was the same height as Rachel, physically reenacted the proposed murder-suicide scenario in the jury room, testing whether the arm length and positioning made anatomical sense. It did not. The holdouts on the jury were convinced. The jury deliberated for less than 12 hours. On June 25, 2008, they returned guilty verdicts on both counts of first-degree murder. As the foreperson read the verdict, Neil Entwistle repeatedly closed his eyes and shook his head. Judge Diane Kottmeyer sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole and added 10 years probation on the firearms charges. She described the murders as crimes that defy comprehension, committed in violation of bonds she called central to our identity as human beings, those of husband and wife, and parent and child. She also ordered that he never profit from the sale of his story. A spokesperson for Rachel's family read a statement. "Our dreams as a parent and grandparent have been shattered by the shameful, selfish act of one person." Neil Entwistle is currently held at Old Colony Correctional Center in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. Every appeal he has filed has been denied. He will die in prison. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Not every killer in this series ran. Some stayed close and tried to manage the investigation from the inside. The case that follows is one of the most brazen examples of that. A man who sat beside the victim's family at the press conference, spoke to cameras, and was only brought down because his best friend eventually could not live with what he knew. Liam McAtasney, 2016, New Jersey, USA. Sarah Stern had been through more loss by 19 than most people face in a lifetime. Her mother had died of cancer in 2013, leaving Sarah to rebuild around that absence. She was an artist, enrolled at Brookdale Community College in New Jersey, studying art and TV production, with a plan to move to Toronto and start fresh. What made that plan feel possible was money. While going through a family property, Sarah had found a shoebox stuffed with cash and a handwritten note explaining it was her inheritance from her mother. There was roughly $10,000 in the box, though Sarah believed her total across accounts was considerably more. One of the people she told was her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. McAtasney had known Sarah since they were young. They had grown up together in Neptune City on the Jersey Shore, the kind of friends who spent ordinary days running errands, grabbing food, watching films. According to his accomplice Preston Taylor, McAtasney described Sarah as having the type of money somebody would kill for. He spent approximately 6 months planning the robbery. The original idea was to get her drunk and take the shoebox. That plan changed. McAtasney and Taylor specifically decided that McAtasney would strangle her. Taylor, who had been Sarah's date to the junior prom and was McAtasney's roommate, agreed to help cover it up afterward. On December 2nd, 2016, Sarah and McAtasney spent the day together the way they had dozens of times before. They ran errands. They went to Taco Bell for lunch. McAtasney had convinced her to visit a safe deposit box and withdraw a portion of the inheritance money. That afternoon, back at Sarah's home, McAtasney got behind her and strangled her. She fought. Her dog lay in the room and watched. She went limp, then began convulsing. McAtasney stuffed a shirt into her mouth during the convulsions and held a finger over her nose. He had started a timer on his phone because he expected it to take a couple of minutes. It took 30 minutes. That detail, the stopwatch, is one of the most disturbing elements of the case. Not because of what it reveals about the act, but because of what it reveals about the person doing it. He had benchmarked how long it should take to kill someone. When it took far longer than expected, he knew because he had been keeping time. When Sarah was dead, McAtasney took 2 safes from the property. He called Preston Taylor. Taylor drove Sarah's grandmother's car to the Route 35 bridge over the Shark River Inlet between Neptune and Belmar. They threw Sarah's body off the bridge into the water below and left the car on the bridge with the keys in the ignition, staged to suggest she had parked there and jumped. The next morning, an Uber driver spotted the abandoned car and called police. McAtasney joined the search. He stood alongside Sarah's father Michael, participated in search parties, and remained embedded in the community mourning her disappearance. Police questioned him early and noted he asked an odd question about how far a body might float if someone jumped from the Route 35 bridge. They flagged it but couldn't act yet. The robbery had not gone as planned. McAtasney had expected $50,000 to $100,000. What he actually got from the safes was around $10,000. Old, damaged bills that were barely usable. Taylor's share was $3,000. McAtasney got the rest. For that, Sarah Stern was dead at 19. 2 months after the murder, McAtasney reached out to a mutual friend named Anthony Curry, a 21-year-old amateur filmmaker. On Thanksgiving 2016, before Sarah disappeared, McAtasney had told Curry what he described as an idea for a horror film, a character who strangles a girl and throws her over a bridge with a friend. Curry had thought nothing of it at the time. After Sarah's disappearance made the news, Curry connected the two and in January 2017 went to Monmouth County Police. Officers asked Curry to participate in a sting. They wired his car with audio and video equipment. Before the conversation started, McAtasney patted Curry down to check for a wire. He found nothing. Then he started talking. McAtasney told Curry he was the only person in the world who knew besides Preston Taylor. He trusted him, and then, on camera, in a parked car while police listened from nearby, he described in detail how he had killed Sarah Stern. The convulsions, the shirt in her mouth, the dog watching. He said her last word before losing consciousness was his name. He talked about the stopwatch. He talked about the money and how little he had ended up with. Then he said, "I don't feel any different, and I don't think about it." Detectives listening in a nearby vehicle looked at each other as McAtasney kept talking and could not believe what they were hearing. McAtasney and Taylor were arrested in February 2017. Taylor pleaded guilty and testified against McAtasney in exchange for an 18-year sentence. At trial, the defence argued the video confession was a fabrication McAtasney had invented to impress a filmmaker. The jury watched the tape. They convicted McAtasney on all 7 counts in February 2019, including first-degree murder, felony murder, robbery, conspiracy, and desecrating human remains. At sentencing, when prosecutors laid out the case for consecutive sentencing, McAtasney wiped tears from his eyes. Assistant Prosecutor Megan Doyle addressed it directly. He has no remorse. His tears today are fake and, if nothing else, insulting. Maybe he's scared. Maybe he's sorry he got caught. But there's no remorse. Judge Richard English sentenced McAtasney to life without the possibility of parole for the murder, plus a consecutive 10 years for desecrating Sarah's remains. He said McAtasney had made several mistakes for someone who thought he was the smartest person in the room, and that he had not counted on Preston Taylor cooperating so quickly. Sarah Stern's body was never recovered. An ocean tides expert testified that, given the time and location of disposal, the body most likely drifted out into the Atlantic. The Route 35 bridge in Belmar has since been decorated as a memorial. She was 19 years old, and she had wanted to go to Toronto. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Some killers on this list made their performance in the first days of the investigation. Others waited, then chose the worst possible moment to unravel. The next case involves a man who vanished for almost a decade, spent years living under a false name, and was only rediscovered because of a chance encounter that nobody planned. Leticia Stauch, 2020, Colorado, USA. Gannon Stauch was born premature, weighing 1 pound 6 ounces, and fought to stay alive from his first hours on Earth. He was 11 years old when his stepmother killed him in his own bedroom. His father Al said at sentencing that he remembered holding that tiny baby in the hospital and watching him fight, and that Gannon had spent his whole life with that same spirit. Leticia Stauch had married Al Stauch and become Gannon's stepmother. Al was in the Army National Guard, and his job required him to be away from home regularly. When he was deployed, Leticia was responsible for Gannon and his younger sister Lena. Prosecutors pointed to a Google search Leticia had conducted as evidence of her state of mind. She had searched the phrase, "I hate my stepson." District Attorney Michael Allen told the jury that she wanted to hurt Gannon, hurt Al, and hurt Gannon's mother Landon Bullard Hyatt. That, prosecutors argued, was the motive. On January 27, 2020, Al was away on deployment. Sometime that afternoon, Leticia went into Gannon's basement bedroom and attacked him. Prosecutors told the jury she stabbed him 18 times, struck him in the head with a blunt object, and shot him 3 times, including once in the head. The knife and blunt object were never recovered. The cause of death was determined by autopsy to be blunt force trauma, sharp force injuries, and a gunshot wound. The beating, the stabbing, and the shooting all contributed to his death. He was 11 years old. At approximately 6:55 p.m. that evening, Leticia called the El Paso County Sheriff's Office and reported Gannon as a runaway. She said he had left the house between 3 and 4 p.m. to walk to a friend's house and had not come back. El Paso County launched a massive search involving drone teams, dog units, horses, helicopters, divers, and the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. On January 31st, 4 days after Gannon was reported missing, Leticia sat down for an on-camera interview and looked into the lens and said, "I would never, ever, ever hurt this child." While she was saying this, a neighbour named Roderick Drayton had already been checking his home security footage. He found it. The footage showed Leticia getting into a red pickup truck on the morning of January 27th. Gannon could be seen walking slowly toward the truck and getting in at 10:13 a.m. The truck returned at 2:19 p.m. Gannon did not get out. Leticia came back alone. The footage directly contradicted her account. She had told investigators Gannon had walked away on his own in the afternoon. The footage showed she had taken him somewhere herself and returned without him. Inside the house, investigators found Gannon's blood soaked through the carpet in his bedroom. Luminol testing revealed the full extent of what had happened in that room. They also found Leticia's DNA on a gun linked to his death. Gannon's blood was found on her shoe. The FBI worked with Al to record phone calls between him and Leticia. 9 calls were recorded over the following weeks. In them, Al asked her directly and repeatedly whether she had killed his son. Every time, she said no. She cried. She screamed. She said she was tired of being portrayed as the killer of a child she loved. Across those 9 calls, Leticia's story changed so many times that FBI Special Agent Amber Cronin testified she could not put a number on exactly how many false accounts had been given. There were simply too many to count. In one call, she blamed a Hispanic man who had broken in, raped her, and taken Gannon. In another, she gave the intruder a name, Quincy Brown. There was no Quincy Brown. She accused Gannon's own mother, Landon, of taking him out of the country. She told Al she was staying with a woman named Michelle in Monument, Colorado. She was already on the East Coast when that call was recorded. There was no Michelle. What Leticia had actually done after the murder was clean up the bedroom, load Gannon's body into a rented van, and drive more than 1,300 miles from Colorado to the Florida Panhandle. Investigators believe she slipped out of a Pensacola hotel in the middle of the night, drove to a bridge over Escambia Bay in Pace, Florida, and left Gannon there, inside a suitcase, under the bridge, hoping the water would carry his body into the Gulf of Mexico. On March 17, 2020, a bridge inspector named Macon Ponder was carrying out routine maintenance work. He found a suitcase. He unzipped it. He smelled it first. The remains inside were identified as Gannon Stauch. Leticia had been arrested 2 weeks earlier, on March 2nd, in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. While being transported back to Colorado, she attacked a deputy and had to be held in a Kansas jail along the route. Her trial began in April 2023. Her lawyers did not dispute that she had killed Gannon. Their entire case rested on the argument that she had suffered a psychotic break and was legally insane, that she had dissociative identity disorder and had been acting as an alternate personality named Maria when she killed him. Prosecutors pointed out that the meticulous cover-up, the cleaning, the rental van, the 1,300-mile drive, the bridge at midnight, was not the behaviour of someone detached from reality. Judge Gregory Verner called Leticia's insanity claims a disservice and a betrayal to people who genuinely live with mental illness. He said the facts were the most horrific he had ever seen in his career on the bench. He said she was motivated by hatred and jealousy of Gannon, of Landon, and driven by resentment at being left to care for children she had come to despise. Al Stauch told the court, "I would not have left you home alone with a murderer and the person who would be the last one to see you alive." Judge Werner sentenced Leticia to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole, plus additional consecutive time for tampering with a deceased human body and tampering with physical evidence. She is currently held at the Colorado Women's Correctional Facility. She will die there. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Gannon Stauch's birth and death certificates will always show he was born premature at 1 pound 6 ounces and that he fought. His father never forgot that. And the court made sure the person who ended that fight will never walk free. John List, 1971, New Jersey, USA. 4 days before he killed everyone in his house, John List sat his family down and asked them how they wanted their remains handled after they died. He framed it as a reasonable question. He was a church-going man, meticulous about planning. Nobody thought anything of it. John Emil List was born on September 17, 1925, in Bay City, Michigan, the only child of German-American Lutheran parents. His childhood was dominated by his mother Alma, who was fiercely protective and kept him from leaving the neighborhood to make friends. He grew up isolated, studious, and deeply religious. He served in the US Army in World War II, returned home, earned a bachelor's degree in business administration and a master's degree in accounting from the University of Michigan, and was recalled to active duty during the Korean War. At Fort Eustis in Virginia, he met Helen Morris Taylor, a widow with a daughter named Brenda. They married in 1951. Over the following years, they had 3 children together: Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick. By 1965, List had risen to vice president and comptroller of a bank in Jersey City, New Jersey. He moved the entire household, Helen, their 3 children, and his elderly mother Alma, into Breeze Knoll, a 19-room Victorian mansion at 431 Hillside Avenue in Westfield, New Jersey. The house had a ballroom, marble fireplaces, and a Tiffany skylight. From the outside, the List family was the picture of stable, respectable American life. John taught Sunday school. He led a Boy Scout troop. He attended church without fail. Neighbours saw a disciplined, devout family man. Behind that picture, everything was collapsing. Helen was an alcoholic. She had contracted syphilis from her first husband before marrying List, and had never disclosed this to him, a fact that affected her health and her mental stability as the years went on. She had increasingly refused to attend church, which List found intolerable. The family finances were deteriorating badly. List lost his bank job in 1971. Rather than tell his family, he continued leaving the house each morning as if going to work, spending his days at the train station reading newspapers. He secretly drained his elderly mother Alma's bank accounts to pay the mortgage. He sank into debt. He was being investigated for financial irregularities. Helen's mother was ill in North Carolina, which List would later use as his cover story. In the weeks leading up to November 9, 1971, List made preparations. He cancelled newspaper delivery. He cancelled milk delivery. He arranged for mail to be held. He sent notes to his children's schools explaining that the family would be away visiting relatives in North Carolina. 16-year-old Patricia had already noticed something was wrong with her father. She told her drama coach she was scared of him and issued a specific warning. If the coach ever heard that the List family had gone on a trip or vacation, it meant her father had killed them all. The coach heard the school's story that week and drove past the house that night to check. The lights in the mansion were all blazing. He assumed everything was fine and drove away. Patricia was already dead. On the morning of November 9th, List went into the kitchen and shot Helen in the jaw. He then went upstairs to the 3rd-floor apartment where Alma, 84 years old, lived and shot her above her left eye. She fell and her knees broke. He put her body on a carpet runner and moved it to a closet. He could not carry her down the stairs. He went back to the kitchen, dragged Helen's body into the ballroom, laid it on a Boy Scout sleeping bag on the floor, and cleaned the blood as best he could. He waited. Patricia called from school saying she was sick. List drove to pick her up. As she walked through the door of the house, he shot her in the back of the head. He laid her next to her mother in the ballroom. He then left the house briefly, went to the bank and mailed several letters. Later that afternoon, he collected 13-year-old Frederick from an after-school job and shot him as they entered the house. Frederick went into the ballroom alongside the others. 15-year-old John Jr. came home early from soccer practice, which List had not anticipated. He shot his son several times, in the chest and in the face. He put his body in the ballroom with his mother, his sister, and his brother. 5 people were dead in that house. List spent the night in the billiards room. Before he left the next morning, he went through every family photograph in the mansion and removed his own face from all of them, cutting himself out of pictures or taking them entirely. He turned on the lights throughout the house. He tuned the intercom system to a religious radio station and turned the volume up so music could be heard from outside. He left a key to a filing cabinet in his study. Inside were 2 handguns used in the murders and several letters, one addressed to his pastor, the Reverend Eugene Raywinkle, and others addressed to relatives. He walked out the front door and did not look back. The 5-page letter to Pastor Raywinkle was the one that would define the case for the next 5 decades. In it, List explained everything. He wrote that his life had fallen apart. He wrote that Helen had stopped going to church. He wrote that his financial ruin meant his children would face shame and hardship. He wrote that the world was too full of evil and corruption for his children to come through it with their souls intact. He wrote that by killing them, he had ensured their passage to heaven, that he had saved them. He asked for understanding and said he expected to eventually confess his sins to God and receive forgiveness. He told Raywinkle he hoped to be reunited with his family in the afterlife. He did not apologize. He explained. John List's family car was found parked at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. Police could not determine if he had boarded a flight. A nationwide manhunt began. Every photograph of List had been destroyed by List himself, leaving investigators almost nothing to work with. The case went cold within months. On December 7, 1971, nearly a month after the murders, neighbours noticed that the lights in Breeze Knoll had been burning day and night and were now going out one by one as bulbs died. Police entered the house. They heard organ music playing through the intercom. They found Helen and the 3 children in the ballroom, laid out on sleeping bags. They found Alma's body in the closet upstairs. All 5 had been shot. The filing cabinet key was on the desk. The letters were inside. By then, John List was living in Colorado under the name Robert Peter Clark, the name of a college classmate who later confirmed he had never known List. He got a job as an accountant. He joined a Lutheran congregation and organised a carpool for congregation members who had no transport. In 1985, at a church gathering, he met a woman named Dolores Miller. She knew nothing about his past. They married. In February 1988, they moved to a house in the Brandermill neighbourhood of Midlothian, Virginia, where List, still going by Bob Clark, took a job at a small accounting firm called Madria, Joyner, Kirkham and Woody. In May 1989, the Fox television programme America's Most Wanted aired a segment on the List murders, then 17 years, 6 months and 23 days cold. Because no reliable photograph of List remained, producers commissioned forensic artist Frank Bender to create a clay bust showing what List would look like after nearly 2 decades of aging. Bender produced a sculpture that bore a striking resemblance to the man living in Virginia as Bob Clark, including a distinctive feature behind one ear. A viewer who had been List's neighbour in Denver saw the segment. She had seen the story in a tabloid years earlier and suspected Clark was List at the time, but had not come forward, the America's Most Wanted broadcast reminded her. She called the show. Less than 2 weeks after the broadcast, on June 1st, 1989, police arrived at the accounting firm in Richmond, Virginia, where Bob Clark worked. They arrested him. He maintained the alias for months, even after being extradited to New Jersey. On February 16, 1990, faced with a fingerprint match against his military records and evidence recovered from Breeze Knoll, he finally confirmed he was John Emil List. At trial, his lawyers argued that his military service had left him with post-traumatic stress disorder and impaired his judgment. They argued the 5-page letter to his pastor should be treated as a confidential pastoral communication and excluded as evidence. A federal appeals court rejected both arguments. On April 12, 1990, The jury convicted him on 5 counts of first-degree murder. On May 1st, he was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms, making him ineligible for parole for close to 125 years. In a 2002 television interview with Connie Chung at New Jersey State Prison, List said, "I wish I had never done what I did. I've regretted my action and prayed for forgiveness ever since." When she asked why he had not simply killed himself if he felt so overwhelmed, he gave the answer he had given in the letter in 1971, that suicide would have prevented him from going to heaven, and he wanted to be reunited with his family there. He said he believed that when they met again in the afterlife, they would either have forgiven him or not remember what happened. Breeze Knoll burned to the ground in August 1972, 9 months after the murders. The fire was ruled arson. No suspects were ever identified. John List died of complications from pneumonia on March 21, 2008, at St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey. He was 82 years old and had been in custody for nearly 2 decades. He never saw freedom again after his arrest. Palmer's body was returned to Michigan and buried at St. Lorenz Lutheran Cemetery in Frankenmuth. Helen, Patricia, John Jr. and Frederick were buried together at Fairview Cemetery in Westfield, New Jersey. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. 16-year-old Patricia had told her drama coach exactly what was coming. Her coach drove past a brightly lit house and thought everything was fine. That detail, one teenager's warning ignored by accident, is one of the most haunting threads in the entire case. Mark Hacking, 2004, Utah, USA. Lori Soares grew up in Orem, Utah, and by every account she was the kind of person who made other people feel good about themselves. Her co-workers at Wells Fargo in Salt Lake City adored her. Her family described her as someone who loved deeply and without conditions. She had been with Mark Hacking since they were teenagers at Orem High School, had married him in 1999, and in the summer of 2004, she was 5 weeks pregnant with their first child. She was 27 years old, and she thought her life was on the edge of something good, a new city, a new chapter, her husband about to start medical school at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. None of that was true. Not a word of it. Mark Hacking came from a family that valued education the way some families value religion. His father, Douglas, was a pediatrician. His mother was a nurse. One brother was a cardiologist. Another was an engineer. A third worked for the government. Mark had grown up feeling the weight of that, and rather than face what he actually was, he had spent years constructing what he wanted people to think he was. He told Lori and everyone around him that he had graduated with honours from the University of Utah. He had not. He had dropped out of classes in 2002 and hadn't told anyone. For the 2 years following, he continued leaving the house each morning as if going to study, carrying textbooks, writing fake term papers. He applied to medical schools, flew to cities for fake interviews, came home and reported how the interviews had gone. He had once stayed with a cousin in New York while pretending to interview at Columbia. He described the campus. He talked about the questions they asked. None of it happened. By the summer of 2004, the couple was packing to move to North Carolina for his enrollment at UNC's medical school. Lori had given notice at Wells Fargo. Friends threw her a going-away party. She was excited. The move was weeks away. On July 16, 2004, 3 days before she disappeared, Lori received a phone call at her Wells Fargo desk. She broke down sobbing at her workstation, told colleagues she had to leave, and went home. The call had come from UNC. Mark had not been accepted. He had never even applied. Medical school had no record of him. That evening, Lori confronted Mark. He admitted he had lied about medical school. According to a friend the couple had confided in, he also admitted that night that he had lied about everything else, about graduating from the University of Utah, about his entire academic history. A note Lori wrote to Mark, found later by police in a spare bedroom, suggested she was processing a profound betrayal. She had discovered that the life she believed she was living had been fabricated by the man she trusted most. Despite this, by Sunday, July 18th, the couple had visibly reconciled. That evening they went together to a convenience store near their apartment in Salt Lake City. Surveillance footage captured them there. It would be the last time anyone outside their home saw Lori Hacking alive. Mark told police, and later his brothers, and eventually a court, that sometime that night he had been packing moving boxes when he found a .22 caliber rifle. At around 1 a.m. on July 19, 2004, while Lori lay sleeping, he went into the bedroom and shot her in the head. What happened next was methodical. He wrapped her body in garbage bags and cut away the blood-soaked top of their mattress with a kitchen knife, wrapping that around her as well. He drove her body to a dumpster and left it there at around 2 a.m. He then disposed of the rifle in a separate dumpster and put the remainder of the cut mattress in a trash bin outside an LDS church about a block from their apartment. He went home, cleaned the bedroom and bathroom with bleach until the tub was scrubbed spotless, and put new sheets, straight from the packet, unwashed, on the bed. At 10:23 a.m. that morning, Mark Hacking's credit card was used to buy a new mattress. At 10:49 a.m, he called police to report his wife missing. He told them Lori had gone for an early morning jog in Memory Grove and City Creek Canyon and hadn't come back. He said she always jogged that route. He said he had driven the trail looking for her and jogged sections of it himself trying to find her. A relative contacted police that same evening and told them Lori never ran alone and that a 5 a.m. start was completely out of character for her. Officers noted the discrepancy immediately. When police began searching the apartment, they found Lori's purse, keys, and wallet still inside, which made no sense if she had driven herself to a park. The bathtub smelled of bleach. There were new sheets on the bed with a brand new mattress below them. A knife with blood and hair on it was recovered from the bedroom. Police matched blood from the knife, the bed rail, the headboard, and the back seat of Lori's car to Lori through DNA. Within hours of the missing person report, investigators were treating the case as a homicide. Mark, meanwhile, was on camera. He spoke to reporters with an emotion-choked voice. He participated in search parties at Memory Grove. He stood beside Lori's family at press conferences. He appeared devastated. One detective later noted that when she asked him to spell oncology, the medical specialty he claimed to be pursuing, he could not do it. On the morning of July 20th, police received a disturbance call to a hotel 4 blocks from the apartment. Mark Hacking was outside in the parking lot, naked except for sandals, behaving erratically. He was taken to the University of Utah Medical Center and admitted to the psychiatric ward. An FBI profiler who later reviewed the case noted the detail of the sandals, that people in a genuine psychotic break rarely keep their shoes on, suggesting the episode was at least partly performance. While Mark was in psychiatric care, the public search for Lori continued for days. Thousands of volunteers combed the Memory Grove area, the canyons, the city. Cadaver dogs were deployed at the city landfill after police came to believe her body had been taken there via the dumpster system. The search was physically brutal, volunteers working through summer heat, sifting through thousands of tons of garbage. On July 21st, Lori's family and Mark's family were both officially informed that Mark had never been accepted to medical school and had never graduated from the University of Utah. The revelation shattered both families. Douglas Hacking, Mark's father, told reporters he believed his son had simply snapped under the weight of being exposed, that when Lori found out, Mark saw his entire fabricated world collapsing and broke. 3 days later, on July 24th, Lance and Scott Hacking, Mark's 2 older brothers, went to the psychiatric ward. Lance had called ahead and asked staff to hold Mark's evening medication so he would be fully lucid when they arrived. They gave him the afternoon to prepare himself. When they returned that evening, they sat down with Mark and pressed him directly for the truth. He told them he had killed Lori while she slept and disposed of her body. After they heard the full account, Scott and Lance sat with their brother for about an hour, holding him. Then they went home. Scott later said he had never in his life felt so relieved and so miserable at the same moment. The confession was passed through an intermediary to police on July 25th. Mark was arrested on August 2nd, 2004, as he was about to be discharged from the psychiatric ward. He was charged with first-degree murder and 3 counts of obstructing justice for disposing of the body, the gun, and the mattress in 3 separate locations. On October 1st, 2004, nearly 2.5 months after Lori's disappearance, workers at the Salt Lake County landfill found human remains at the location Mark had eventually directed investigators to. About 15 pounds of remains were recovered, including a jawbone and teeth. Searchers had been sifting through the landfill by hand. The carpet Mark had used to roll Laurie's body was found nearby. Because Laurie's remains were too decomposed to confirm her pregnancy, prosecutors could not charge Mark with her unborn child's death, which meant the death penalty was off the table. On April 15, 2005, Mark Hacking stood before Judge Denise Lindberg and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in exchange for the obstruction charges being dropped. In a flat voice, he said, "Your Honour, I intentionally shot Laurie Hacking in the head with a .22 rifle on July 19, 2004. At sentencing on June 6, 2005, he said, "She was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, but I killed her and took the life of my unborn child and put them in the garbage, and I can't explain why I did it." Judge Denise Lindberg sentenced Mark Hacking to 6 years to life in prison, the maximum available under Utah law for the charge. In Utah, sentences are indeterminate, meaning the Board of Pardons and Parole decides actual release. He will not be considered for parole before 2035. He is currently held at the Central Utah Correctional Facility in Gunnison. Laurie's brother Paul said publicly after the plea that Mark had not needed to be a doctor or anything in particular. As long as he was doing his best, she would have loved him. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Laurie's headstone was later updated. Her family removed the Hacking surname and replaced it with Filhinha, the Portuguese word for little daughter. Derek Medina. Most killers try to hide what they did. Derek Medina did the opposite. He took a photo of his wife's body on his cell phone, logged into Facebook, and posted it for everyone to see. Friends, family, strangers, the world. The image showed Jennifer Alfonso slumped backward on the kitchen floor of their South Miami townhouse, blood on her arm and face, shot 8 times. He attached a caption. Then he drove to his father's house, told him what he'd done, and the two of them drove to the police station together so he could turn himself in. The date was August 8, 2013. By the time police arrived at the house, the photo had already been online for hours. Derek Medina was 31 years old and worked as a property manager in South Miami. He had also appeared as a background extra in one episode of the television series Burn Notice. He posted videos to YouTube of himself sailing and hitting a punching bag. He described himself as an emotional writer and had self-published at least 6 ebooks on spirituality and self-help, with titles so long they barely fit on a single line. Among them, How I Saved Someone's Life, and Marriage and Family Problems Through Communication, and How I, an Emotional Writer, Made All of My Professional Dreams Come True, Blocking Society's Teachings. He maintained a website called emotionalwriter.com. He was also a trained amateur boxer. In his own mind, he was someone worth listening to. Jennifer Alfonso was 27 years old, a waitress at a local Denny's, and had a 10-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. She and Medina lived together with the girl in their townhouse in South Miami. By the accounts of people who knew her, Jennifer wanted to leave the relationship. Friends testified at trial that Medina had told her directly, more than once, that if she ever tried to leave him, he would kill her. The morning of August 8th started with an argument. Medina had promised Jennifer he would wake her up early to watch a movie together. He didn't do it. When she confronted him, it escalated. According to the account Medina gave to police in a videotaped statement, an account that was played in full during his trial, the two fought in their upstairs bedroom, and he pointed a gun at her but did not fire. Jennifer walked away from the argument. Then she came back and told him she was leaving him. At that point, according to Medina's own statement, the argument moved to the downstairs kitchen. Part of what happened there was captured on the home's own interior surveillance cameras. Medina told police that Jennifer grabbed a large kitchen knife and held it toward him. He said he was able to take the knife away from her and put it in a drawer. Then, he said, she started punching him. So he went back upstairs, got his gun, came back down and shot her. He did not shoot her once. He emptied the clip. 8 shots, all fired downward. The medical examiner testified at trial that the angle and trajectory of every single bullet indicated Jennifer was below Medina when she was killed, crouched or cowering on her knees, not standing and attacking him. She sustained 21 entry and exit wounds. The lead detective on the case, Miami-Dade detective Jonathan Grossman, testified that when Medina gave his videotaped statement to police, he was calm and collected. There was no visible injury anywhere on Medina's body in photos taken that same day, despite his claim that Jennifer had been punching and attacking him. Investigators noted this. Prosecutors noted it too. After shooting Jennifer, Medina changed his clothes. He picked up his cell phone, walked back into the kitchen, and took a photograph of her body. He opened Facebook and posted it. Along with the image, he wrote, "I'm going to prison or death sentence for killing my wife. Love you guys. Miss you guys. Take care, Facebook people. You will see me in the news. My wife was punching me, and I am not going to stand anymore with the abuse, so I did what I did. I hope you understand me." The post stayed up for approximately 5 hours. It spread rapidly, shared, screenshotted, passed around the internet before Facebook was notified and removed both the image and his account. Jennifer's 10-year-old daughter was upstairs in her bedroom the entire time her mother was being shot in the kitchen below her. She did not see what happened. She was then left alone in that house for several hours, while Medina drove to his father's and then to the police station. Medina was charged with first-degree murder. He maintained from the moment he walked into the police station that he acted in self-defense, that Jennifer had come at him with a knife and he had no choice. He repeated this in his 28-minute videotaped police statement in detail. He repeated it in phone calls from prison to NBC6 after his conviction, conducted in a series of 12 calls because the facility did not allow in-person interviews. "I'm not the Facebook killer. I'm Derek Medina," he told NBC6. "The media has created a monster, and I'm not a monster." He described Jennifer as violent and said he had been living in fear of her for years. He told the interviewer he shot a warning shot first to try to stop her, and she kept coming. The forensic evidence produced at trial made no room for that story. The defense tried to introduce evidence that Jennifer had used drugs and had written in her diary about harming Medina. They also sought to present expert testimony that Medina was a victim of battered spouse syndrome. Circuit Judge Yvonne Kolodny blocked both pieces of evidence from being presented to the jury. Prosecutors, meanwhile, presented Jennifer's friends, who testified about the threats Medina had made against her life if she tried to leave him. They presented the home surveillance footage. They presented the medical examiner's testimony about the angle of the wounds, and they pointed out that Medina, a trained amateur boxer, was physically more than capable of handling an unarmed woman without shooting her 8 times. In her closing argument, prosecutor Leah Klein told the jury that Medina had emptied the clip. Not 1 shot, not 2, not 3 or 4 or 5, but 8 into Jennifer as she cowered below him. Medina did not testify in his own defense during the 3-week trial. The jury deliberated for approximately 6 hours across 2 days. On November 25, 2015, they returned a verdict of guilty, second-degree murder, meaning they did not find the level of premeditation required for first degree, but found beyond doubt that he had killed Jennifer unlawfully. He was also convicted of illegally discharging a firearm inside a dwelling and child neglect for leaving Jennifer's daughter alone in the house while he turned himself in. At sentencing on February 8, 2016, Medina gave a brief statement to Judge Kolodny that touched on Barack Obama, government corruption, and the 2014 horror film Unfriended, which he claimed had been released before his trial in a way that biased the public against him. He announced he would be suing the world. He said he had not received a fair trial. He said God knew the truth. Judge Kolodny sentenced him to the maximum, life in prison, with a minimum of 25 years before any parole consideration. Before imposing the sentence, she addressed him directly. She told him that in his Facebook post, he had predicted his own future. "You wrote on Facebook that, 'I am going to prison,'" she said, "and that is where you will be going." Jennifer Alfonso's mother, Carolyn Knox, addressed the court before sentencing. She wasn't just a body on the floor to be discovered, she said. She was a wonderful, amazing person. She had so much to give, and now that's gone. Derek Medina is currently serving his life sentence at a Florida State Correctional Facility. He continues to maintain in prison communications that he acted in self-defense. Most cases in this series involve killers who worked hard to distance themselves from what they did, people who cried on camera, organised search parties, crafted stories, and waited for the evidence to catch them. Medina did something different. He published the crime himself, added a caption, and let the world watch. What followed was 2 years of insisting he was the victim in it. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.